What if the secret to saving, like a massive high-stakes business deal, wasn't about slashing your price at all?
Oh, that completely goes against everything we're taught, right?
Right. I mean, imagine being in the final hour of a negotiation. The tension in the room is just suffocating.
Yeah, you can cut it with a knife.
Exactly. And the client is sitting across from you, arms crossed, completely closed off,
Hmm.
and they're telling you that your numbers just do not work.
That's the nightmare scenario for anyone in sales or leadership.
It really is. And everything in your professional training just screams at you to pull out, a flashy 100-slide PowerPoint.
Oh, yeah, or boot up some ridiculously complex spreadsheet.
Right. You want to mathematically prove your return on investment. You want to just fight their resistance with this absolute avalanche of logic.
Because that's what we do. We retreat to data when we're stressed.
We do.
Hmm.
But what if, instead, the entire deal, like this multi-million-dollar contract, hinged on simply pulling a 63-cent loaf of grocery store white bread out of a mysterious brown paper bag?
I mean, it sounds completely absurd on the surface. If you actually saw someone do that in a boardroom, you'd think they had lost their mind.
You would. You'd think they were having a breakdown.
But that absurdity, that complete break from the expected corporate choreography, is exactly why it works so well.
Right. Because we like to think of business, especially at the highest levels, as this purely rational, numbers-driven environment.
We really do worship at the altar of data, don't we?
We do. But human behavior, at its core, is just profoundly irrational.
It absolutely is. And the most successful people in any field of influence, they know this.
Yeah. Whether they are negotiating a corporate merger or trying to win over a skeptical team or even just trying to get a toddler to eat their vegetables.
Oh, the toddler negotiation is the hardest one of all.
It's brutal, but those successful people, they know how to completely bypass logic. They speak directly to the underlying human emotion that actually drives decision-making.
Which is why we are diving into this today.
Yes, exactly. I was reading through Jeb Blount's notes on this recently, specifically his breakdown of what he calls the mysterious brown bag strategy.
It is such a brilliant concept from Chapter 1 of Sales EQ.
It really is. And it completely changed how I view negotiations and everyday persuasion. So today, we are doing a deep dive into this because it flips the conventional wisdom of influence entirely upside down.
It's a total paradigm shift.
So for you listening, you are going to learn how to bypass the mental defenses of stubborn, resistant people.
And use raw human psychology to differentiate yourself when everything else just looks exactly the same.
Exactly. So if you're trying to build a business, lead a team, or just want to understand the hidden mechanics of how people actually make decisions, this is essentially a masterclass in taking control of high-stakes conversations.
It absolutely is. And, to really grasp the mechanics of this, we can't just look at the theory. We have to look at the real-world application.
Right, we need a story.
Yeah, we need to set the stage with a very specific high-pressure scenario involving 3 key players.
Okay, let's hear it.
So first, we have Art. And Art is 23 years old. He has just landed this massive promotion as a lease sales representative.
Okay, handling complex, long-cycle deals at 23, that's a lot of pressure.
It's huge. And by his own admission, he says, somebody left the company and I got lucky.
So imposter syndrome is probably kicking in.
Big time. He is young, he's incredibly eager, but he is just painfully inexperienced when it comes to the nuances of human psychology.
He is basically swimming with the sharks. He knows the specs of his product, I bet, but he doesn't know the people buying it.
Exactly. But thankfully, he has a mentor. So enter our second character, Joe.
Okay, Joe is the seasoned veteran, right?
Yes. Joe is what you would call an ultra-high performer. He totally understands that the spreadsheet is just secondary to the emotional game of sales.
Right. He gets the human element.
He does. And they're both walking into the lion's den to face our third character, Mr. Colatesy.
Mr. Colatesy. That just sounds like an intimidating name.
Oh, he is the ultimate prospect and the ultimate roadblock. He runs the Colatesy Baking Company.
Yeah.
He is a tough-as-nails, old-school business owner, and Art has been desperately trying to sell him this massive truck leasing program for his entire delivery fleet.
Which would be a huge commission, I'm sure. But what's the catch?
The problem is that Mr. Colatesy is absolutely convinced that Art's rates are just astronomically high.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, he has flat out refused to listen to a single additional pitch about superior service or unmatched quality. He has completely shut down the conversation.
Wow, okay, so we have this immovable object.
Yes, very immovable.
Why is Colatesy so incredibly resistant, though? Like, why won't he even look at the numbers if they might help his business?
So this is where we have to explore this concept known as the pattern monster.
The pattern monster. I love that term.
To understand it, we really have to look at the cognitive reality of a modern decision maker.
Right, what's actually happening in their brain.
Exactly. The human brain is constantly, just relentlessly bombarded with billions of bits of sensory and informational input.
It's overwhelming when you really think about it.
Just stop for a second and think about the sheer volume of data your brain is processing right now as you're listening to this.
Oh, sure. The temperature of the room. The subtle background noise, like the hum of the AC.
Yeah, the notifications vibrating on your phone, the lingering thoughts about your inbox.
If your brain consciously, actively processed every single one of those data points all at once, you would just experience complete cognitive paralysis.
You'd be totally incapable of making even the simplest decision.
Because the brain is a really energy-intensive organ, right? It physically cannot afford to spend calories analyzing every single thing it encounters.
Precisely. The brain consumes about 20% of the body's energy while only making up about 2% of its weight.
Wow, 20%. It really is an energy hog.
It is. So, to survive, the brain evolved into this incredibly efficient prediction machine.
Okay, so it evolved to basically grab incoming information and instantly categorize it.
Right, into recognizable patterns. And then it dictates behavior completely on autopilot. We rely heavily on these heuristics, these mental shortcuts, to manage that immense cognitive load.
You know, this totally reminds me of the concept of swipe fatigue on a dating app.
Oh, that is the perfect modern equivalent.
Right, because when you first download the app, you look at every single profile carefully. You read the bios, you analyze the backgrounds of the photos.
You're fully engaged.
Exactly. But after like an hour of scrolling, every single profile just blurs together into one identical pattern.
And another person holding a fish.
Another person standing in front of Machu Picchu.
Another person saying they love tacos and travel.
Yes. And your brain just gives up on looking for nuance because the cognitive load is way too high. You just start swiping left on pure autopilot.
That is such a brilliant analogy, and it maps absolutely perfectly onto the B2B business environment.
Right. So the buyer's reflex script is basically the corporate equivalent of swiping left on autopilot.
Exactly. Let's look back at Mr. Kolitzy. He is sitting in his office trying to run this really complex bakery operation,
Yeah, he's a busy guy.
and he is looking at a parade of truck leasing vendors. To his brain, they are all the exact same pattern.
They all wear the same tailored suits.
Yep. They all carry the same glossy, high production value marketing brochures.
They all have that same rehearsed introductory handshake, right?
And they all make the exact same hollow promises about superior service, unmatched reliability, and quality.
So to Coletzi, art is literally just the 100th guy holding a fish on a dating app.
Exactly. Inside that vast gray pattern of sameness, Coletzi simply does not have the time, the patience, or the cognitive energy to sit there and parse out the tiny differences.
Right, like the nuanced differences between vendor A's maintenance schedule and vendor B's tire replacement policy.
It is way too complex. It requires too many calories. So his brain deploys a mental shortcut.
It just lumps all the vendors together into one big category of annoying salespeople.
And then it shifts into a reflex script just to get rid of them.
And his reflex script is brutal from what I read.
Oh, it is.
It's essentially, your price is too high, all you truck companies are exactly the same, and if you can't match your competitors' rock-bottom prices, get out of my office.
From a purely cognitive standpoint, you really have to admire the efficiency of it.
I mean, yeah, it is an incredibly effective way for him to deal with the overwhelming complexity of the marketplace.
And it lets him get back to his actual job, which is baking bread and running a company.
Okay, hold on. I have to stop you there and push back a little bit on this.
Sure, go for it.
I understand cognitive load. I get that the brain wants to save energy. But Coletzi is running a multi-million-dollar bakery.
He is.
It is literally his job to look at the nuances of his operational costs. You're telling me he's just too mentally exhausted to look at a fuel efficiency chart that could maybe save his company $100,000 a year?
It sounds counterintuitive, I know.
It just sounds like a stretch. Shouldn't a competent business owner fight through that cognitive fatigue to find the absolute best deal?
In a perfectly rational, theoretical world, yes, absolutely. He would meticulously analyze every single data point.
But we don't live in that world.
Exactly. We do not live in a theoretical world. We live in a world governed by human psychology.
Right.
When faced with complexity and aggressive demands on our time, the human brain seeks the path of least resistance.
So it's not that he's lazy.
Not at all. It's not that Khaleesi is lazy or incompetent. It's that his cognitive resources are finite.
And they're probably constantly being drained by other fires he has to put out.
Exactly, like a supply chain crisis with his flour vendors or a broken oven. The truck leases are just one tiny fraction of his day.
So if he can deploy this harsh reflex script to instantly dismiss a vendor, he maintains the status quo.
And he saves his mental energy for the real fires. His brain actually rewards him for that efficiency.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. The status quo feels safe, and analyzing 20 different lease options feels like a direct threat to his time. So if we look at this from the perspective of the person trying to influence him, like if you're listening to this and trying to win a deal or pitch an idea, what's the takeaway?
The major paradigm shift here is realizing that when a prospect hits you with a harsh rejection, it is almost never about you.
It is rarely personal, even when it feels like intensely personal.
Yes. They aren't rejecting your soul.
They aren't even really rejecting your product because they haven't actually looked at it.
Right. Their brain is just deploying a reflex script to manage cognitive overload.
You are just collateral damage in their brain's quest to save calories. You've basically been identified as part of a pattern they want to ignore.
Which brings us to the crucial pivot point. Once you understand that you are not facing a reasoned, logical objection,
But rather a mindless reflex script.
yes, you have to radically evaluate how you respond to it. And this is where almost every single average communicator fails spectacularly.
Because they fall headfirst into this massive psychological trap, right?
Yes. It's called complementary behavior.
Okay, let's set the scene for this trap because it is just so common it hurts.
It really is. So picture this. Khaleesi leans back in his heavy leather chair. He crosses his arms across his massive chest.
The classic defensive pose.
Yeah, he glares at Art and Joe, and he essentially delivers his script.
Which is, your rates are way higher than your competitors. I know you're going to sit there and tell me your service is better. Save your breath.
Exactly. You're all exactly the same. Get your prices in line, or the door is right behind you.
Notice the physical and verbal posture there. It is highly aggressive.
Very dominant, very dismissive.
He has just written a script for the interaction, handed it across the desk to Art and Joe, and he is fully expecting them to read their assigned parts.
Right. And if you are sitting in that chair, feeling the heat of that rejection,
My immediate visceral instinct, like my evolutionary fight-or-flight response, is to fight back.
of course it is. Your adrenaline spikes.
I want to rip open my briefcase, pull out my meticulously crafted spreadsheets, and logically, mathematically bludgeon him with proof.
You want to show him exactly why your trucks have a 99% uptime.
Yes. And why our preventative maintenance saves him thousands in the long run. I want to meet his aggressive dismissal with my undeniable logic.
It feels like the absolute right move.
I have to defend my value, right? Like, that's my job.
It feels incredibly right in the moment. It feels completely necessary. But it is the exact wrong move.
Wait, really?
It is fatal to the deal. That urge you just described, that is complementary behavior.
Oh, because I'm playing right into his script.
Exactly. You are conforming perfectly to his expectations of how a desperate salesperson acts.
So if he is aggressive, and I immediately become defensive and argumentative, I'm complimenting his behavior.
You were just reading the lines he wrote for you.
Because that is exactly what every other vendor did.
Yes.
The other 99 guys on the dating app did the exact same thing. They sat there and argued about uptime and quality.
Which just further proves Khaleesi's underlying hypothesis that they're all identically annoying.
Wow. So when you engage in complementary behavior, you just surrender all control of the interaction.
Your probability of winning that person over absolutely plummets to 0.
Why is that, though? Just because it's expected.
Because you cannot argue a stakeholder out of an emotional objection with sheer logic.
Oh, right. Because human beings almost always act on emotion first.
Yes, and then they subsequently scramble to justify those emotional actions with logic.
So Khaleesi's objection isn't really about the mathematical difference in lease rates.
Not at all. It is about the emotional safety of his current setup and the sheer mental exhaustion of dealing with vendors.
Man, it's like bringing a spreadsheet to a feeling fight. It just does not translate.
That's a great way to put it.
I mean, if my partner is visibly upset because they feel like I haven't been paying enough attention to them lately,
Oh, this is going to be a good example.
and my response is to pull out a literal logbook and say, well, actually, according to my data, I spent exactly 4.2 hours with you this week. which is a 15% increase from last week.
Oh no, you are going to be sleeping on the couch for a month.
Easily a month. But it's true. I'd be attacking an emotional state feeling ignored with raw, cold data.
And it backfires every single time, whether it's in a relationship or a boardroom.
So what's the practical takeaway for the listener here?
The takeaway is vital. You must learn to monitor your own physiological responses.
Like paying attention to your heart rate.
Exactly. When someone hands you an aggressive script, your internal alarms will sound. Your heart rate will increase.
You'll feel that desperate urge to defend, argue, or just fold under the pressure.
Yes. You have to recognize that feeling, pause, and actively refuse to read from the script they just handed you.
Which brings us back to Joe, the ultra-high performer.
Yes, Joe.
Because Joe feels that same pressure, I'm sure, but he does not read the script.
He does not. In fact, he takes the script, sets it on fire, and completely changes the game.
We need to narrate this incredible sequence of events, because this is where the core concept of the mysterious brown bag really comes to life.
It is an absolute masterclass in what we call non-complementary disruption.
Okay, let's rewind the tape slightly. Because before this high-pressure meeting even happened, Joe made a very strange, seemingly inexplicable move.
He really did. So he was driving Art to the bakery for the meeting.
They're going over the numbers, prepping for the onslaught they know is coming from Kolaidze.
Right. And suddenly, Joe pulls the car into the parking lot of a local supermarket.
Just out of nowhere.
Yeah, he turns to Art and says, "Wait here." 10 minutes later, Joe walks out of the supermarket carrying a plain brown paper bag.
And he throws in the back seat. Doesn't say a single word to explain it.
No explanation at all, and they just continue the drive to the bakery.
You can just imagine Art's anxiety spiking. Like he's a young kid, his biggest deal is on the line, and his mentor is acting like a total weirdo.
Seriously.
Yeah.
So they arrive at the bakery, they sit in the lobby for 20 minutes.
And Joe was just sitting there calmly holding this mysterious brown paper bag on his lap, like it's a prized possession.
While Art is probably sweating bullets, having absolutely no idea what is going on.
Finally, they get called into the inner sanctum. They sit across from Kolaidze.
And Kolaidze immediately launches into his aggressive script. "You're all the same, your price is too high, get out."
The whole monologue. And Joe doesn't flinch.
He doesn't get defensive, he doesn't puff out his chest.
He doesn't reach for a single spreadsheet.
Instead, Joe calmly places the brown paper bag right in the middle of Mr. Kolaidze's expansive desk.
He slowly unfolds the top of the bag. He reaches in, and he pulls out 2 loaves of bread.
Just unbelievable.
One is a 63-cent loaf of generic, squishy supermarket brand white bread.
And the other is a beautiful, crusty $1.87 loaf of Kolaidze's own Italian bread.
Joe sets the empty bag on the floor. He places the 2 loaves side by side directly in front of Kolaidze.
And then Joe does the absolute hardest thing for any communicator to do.
He says absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all.
He just lets the silence hang heavy in the air.
We really need to freeze time for a second and dissect that silence. Because that silence is a weapon.
It is a tool of immense psychological power.
It really is. In that vacuum of silence, Kolaidze's fight-or-flight script is just crashing.
His brain, which just seconds ago was operating on pure autopilot, is now frantically searching for a pattern to match this bizarre behavior.
But it can't find one. No vendor has ever pulled grocery store bread out of a bag before.
Right. Because his brain cannot categorize this event, it is forced into a state of hyperfocus.
He has literally broken the pattern monster.
It's so brilliant.
He has completely short-circuited Kolaidze's expectations of how a salesperson should behave in this environment.
So Kolaidze's amygdala, the part of the primitive brain that is constantly scanning the environment for patterns and threats, suddenly registers a massive anomaly.
Yes, this is new. This is different. This requires immediate conscious processing.
This instantly yanks Kolaidze out of his autopilot reflex script.
And pulls his full undivided attention directly toward Joe. There is a beautiful quote from Anton Riverol that perfectly encapsulates this.
Oh yeah, I remember this quote from the notes. It says, "It is the dim haze of mystery that adds enchantment to pursuit."
Exactly. Joe brought raw mystery into the most boring, predictable environment on Earth. A B2B sales meeting.
The physical presence of the bread is just genius. But obviously, the silence can't last forever.
No, eventually you have to speak.
Finally, Joe breaks the tension. But he doesn't launch into a pitch.
No, he asks a question.
He says, "Mr. Kolaidze, I'm just curious. What's the difference between this loaf of supermarket brand white bread that costs 63 cents and this loaf of Collee's Italian bread that costs $1.87.
What makes yours worth 3 times as much?
It is an absolutely brilliant, multi-layered psychological maneuver.
Notice the phrasing there. It is completely non-threatening. I'm just curious.
He isn't accusing Collee's of anything. He isn't demanding an answer.
He is simply inviting an explanation. By using a physical prop, the bag and the contrasting loaves of bread, and an entirely unexpected, out-of-context question, Joe creates a massive disruption in the cognitive script.
It feels like a conversational magic trick.
It really does.
Instead of desperately defending his own higher truck prices, Joe completely inverts the power dynamic.
Yes.
He essentially forces the buyer to explain the complex concept of premium value for him.
Think about the brilliance of that. Joe does not sit there and say, listen, Mr. Colleazy, here is a logical argument for why premium things cost more and why our trucks are premium.
Because that would just trigger the defensive reflex again?
Exactly. Instead, he asks Colleazy to explain why premium things cost more. He makes Colleazy the expert on value.
So, if you are listening to this right now, how do you actually apply this concept? Because you obviously don't have to carry around grocery store bread to all your meetings.
No, that would be weird if you're selling software consulting.
Super weird.
Uh-huh.
But the underlying mechanics are universally applicable, right?
Completely. You need to find a physical, visual, or a highly unexpected metaphorical way to reframe your own value proposition.
You have to break the expected pattern of your industry.
Yes. If everyone in your field sends a slick 20-page PDF proposal, send a handwritten letter on heavy stock paper.
If everyone starts a Zoom meeting by immediately sharing their screen and showing a slide deck,
Start the meeting by holding up a physical object that relates to their problem.
do something, anything, that forces their brain to pause, step off the autopilot track, and say, wait, what is this?
Because once you have achieved that disruption, once you have genuinely captured their active attention and broken the pattern, you can initiate the next phase.
Which is an even more powerful phase of this influence framework.
Yes, and this is where Joe's genius transitions from just disruption to deep psychological connection.
This is the activation of the self-disclosure dopamine loop.
This part is fascinating.
It really is. So Joe has asked the disruptive question. What makes your bread worth 3 times as much? He has laid the trap.
And what does Colleazy do?
He takes the bait. He takes the stage.
He doesn't just take the stage, he aggressively seizes it.
He leans forward. He starts lecturing Art and Joe. He goes incredibly deep into the granular details of his business.
He talks about the high quality of his imported ingredients.
He explains the specialized, time-consuming baking process they use.
He talks about his family's long history in the business, the heritage, the immense care and dedication they put into every single loaf that leaves his factory.
He is passionately, vigorously defending exactly why his bread is vastly superior to the cheap, mass-produced supermarket bread sitting next to it.
And as he is doing this, a profound neurochemical reaction is taking place inside his brain.
What's happening there?
When human beings talk about themselves, their passions, their company, or their specific expertise, it triggers a self-disclosure dopamine loop.
Wow.
Neuroscience research, including some major studies out of Harvard, has shown that humans are intrinsically chemically rewarded for disclosing information about themselves.
So the brain actually releases dopamine just from talking about yourself.
Exactly. And dopamine is a neurotransmitter closely associated with pleasure, reward, and motivation.
It literally activates the exact same reward centers in the brain that light up when we eat delicious food or receive money, right?
It does. It feels incredibly good to be the expert.
So his brain is absolutely dripping with dopamine right now because he finally gets a captive audience to brag about his life's work, his bread.
Yes. And what are Joe and Art doing while Clyde Z is holding court? Are they interrupting him to talk about trucks?
Not at all. They are doing the single most important and often most difficult thing you can do in sales or negotiation.
Or, frankly, any human relationship.
They are listening intensely. They are leaning in. They are maintaining eye contact.
They are giving Khaled their complete, undivided, unhurried attention.
By doing this, they are providing him with what is arguably the most powerful gift you can give another human being.
The feeling of true importance.
The gift of importance. That really hits hard.
Yeah.
I mean, in a world where everyone is constantly distracted, where everyone is just waiting for their turn to speak,
Giving someone your absolute focus makes them feel incredibly significant.
it is the most insatiable human need. We all crave validation.
We all want to feel that our work, our thoughts, and our existence matter.
When you give someone that stage, When you make them feel truly heard and important without an immediate hidden agenda, you completely lower their emotional defensive walls.
The amygdala stops seeing you as a threat and starts seeing you as an ally.
Okay, I have to jump in here with a major point of skepticism, though.
I figured you might.
I see the psychology. I understand the dopamine release. I get that Khaleesi feels great right now.
Right.
But let's be real. Joe didn't even pitch his trucks. He hasn't said a single syllable about lease terms, engine reliability, tire wear, or maintenance schedules.
That is entirely true.
He sells trucks, not flour.
Yeah.
How on earth does making a bakery owner feel important about yeast and baking processes actually translate into closing a multi-million-dollar deal for vehicle leases?
It seems like a massive leap.
It does. Coletti's an idiot. Are they just going to become best friends, sing campfire songs, and Khaleesi's going to magically forget that Joe's trucks cost 20% more? How does the bridge actually happen?
That is the crucial question, and the answer lies in a deeply ingrained psychological principle called the law of reciprocity.
The law of reciprocity.
This isn't just a networking tactic, it is an evolutionary survival mechanism.
Like from early human societies.
Exactly. In early human societies, survival depended on mutual cooperation. If I share my food with you today, you are socially and psychologically obligated to share your food with me tomorrow.
Right, is hardwired into us.
It is. This hardwired sense of obligation still governs our interactions today. When you give someone your complete attention, when you validate their life's work and make them feel profoundly important, you create a deep subconscious feeling of psychological debt.
An obligation to return the favor.
Exactly. And to illustrate just how powerful this law of reciprocity is, we have to look at this beautiful story shared in the source material.
Oh, the story about the bus in Japan, right? Let's talk about that.
Yes. The author describes a time when he was traveling Kyoto, Japan, with his young son.
And they find themselves on this crowded, sweltering, incredibly uncomfortable public bus.
Yeah, just miserable conditions. They end up standing next to a young Japanese businessman.
Now, they do not speak the same language. There is a massive cultural and linguistic barrier.
But they strike up a brief, struggling, pieced-together conversation anyway.
They managed to bond over naming their favorite international music bands.
Just finding that tiny, tiny sliver of common ground.
It's just a few minutes of shared humanity, a few laughs, and genuine, undivided attention in a miserable environment.
Now watch what happens. As the bus arrives at the businessman's stop and he prepares to get off, he suddenly reaches into his backpack.
He pulls out a small, carefully wrapped box and absolutely insists on giving it to the author.
He will not take no for an answer.
The author takes the box back to his hotel room, opens it, and finds 5 slices of raw fish wrapped in leaves.
Which, to an American kid, is probably horrifying.
Oh, the author's son is completely repulsed. He says, "Dad, you cannot eat raw fish out of a random guy's backpack from a hot bus."
And from a purely logical health and safety standpoint, the kid is completely right. It makes no sense.
But the author understands the underlying gesture. It wasn't about the fish.
No, not at all.
By giving that businessman a moment of genuine connection, respect, and importance on that miserable bus ride, the law of reciprocity was triggered.
The businessman felt a profound, overwhelming emotional obligation to give something of high value in return.
The fish was likely his lunch, something he highly valued, and he gave it away just to balance the psychological ledger.
That is exactly it. So, translating that back to the high-stakes boardroom.
By giving Khaleesi the floor, by actively validating his entire life's work and listening to him talk about his bread with such reverence, Joe has triggered that exact same law of reciprocity.
Khaleesi doesn't just feel good. He feels emotionally connected, deeply understood, and subconsciously obligated to Joe.
Joe gave him the gift of importance, and now Khaleesi owes him the gift of a fair hearing.
That is the emotional bridge. But it gets even better, because Joe has also set a brilliant logical trap that Khaleesi has just happily walked right into.
Right, a logical trap.
Think about what Khaleesi has been doing for the last 10 minutes.
He's been bragging about his bread.
More specifically, he has been passionately, aggressively, and articulately arguing the business case for why a consumer should pay a premium price for superior quality.
Oh, wow. I see it now. He literally just delivered Joe's sales pitch for him.
He did the heavy lifting. Joe does not have to engage in a defensive, uphill battle to argue that his premium trucks are worth more than the competitor's cheap trucks.
Khaleesi himself just spent 10 minutes explaining, with extreme passion, that premium products are fundamentally cheaper and better in the long run because of the quality, the care, the reliability, and the expertise behind them.
And because humans have a deep psychological need for consistency, Khaleesi cannot cognitively contradict himself now.
He can't say, quality matters in bread, but it doesn't matter in trucks. That would cause massive cognitive dissonance.
Exactly. Joe will now effortlessly bridge Khaleesi's own argument about the Italian bread directly back to the truck leases.
He can simply say, Mr. Khaleesi, the exact same care, reliability, and premium quality that you put into this $1.87 loaf of bread is what we put into our maintenance schedules.
We are the Khaleesi bread of the trucking industry.
Boom. The objection to price hasn't just been handled. It has been completely neutralized by the buyer himself.
That is just phenomenal maneuvering.
So if we step back, what does this all mean for the listener?
Well, whether you are pitching a client, asking for a raise, or trying to convince your partner to go on a specific vacation.
The fastest way to win someone over is almost never to talk about how great you are.
No, it is not to beat them over the head with your features, your benefits, or your flawless logic.
It is to find a way to ask a disruptive, unexpected question that completely breaks their autopilot pattern.
Then you let them talk about how great they are or what they value.
And you listen so deeply that you give them that rare gift of importance. You don't persuade them. You create the environment where they persuade themselves into your value proposition.
It is the ultimate masterful expression of emotional intelligence in a practical setting. You are managing their emotions by first managing your own.
Which perfectly brings us to our synthesis.
Let's tie it all together.
If we pull all of these intricate threads together, the cognitive load, the reflex scripts, the dopamine loops, the law of reciprocity, what is the ultimate soul of this chapter?
The core insight here is that ultra-high performance in any business dealing, and really in any complex human interaction, is rarely about the product itself.
When you are operating in a highly competitive market, everything looks exactly the same to the buyer. You are dealing with exhausted pattern monsters.
And because the product is no longer the differentiator, you have to be the differentiator.
Your ability to navigate human psychology is the only true competitive advantage left.
Exactly. It is all about sales EQ. It's about emotional intelligence.
It is about mastering your own disruptive emotions. It is about feeling that desperate, adrenaline-fueled urge to argue and defend yourself when you are attacked, and having the discipline to suppress it.
You have to creatively manage the irrational emotional behavior of others instead of fighting it with spreadsheets.
Joe won that multi-million-dollar truck deal the exact moment he walked into a grocery store and bought a paper bag.
Because he knew he wasn't walking into a math problem. He was walking in to navigate a complex, emotional human being.
And successfully navigating human beings requires profound empathy, intense self-awareness, and the strategic courage to disrupt expectations.
You cannot force a buyer to adapt to your sales process. You have to approach buyers the way their brains are actually wired to buy.
It is such a powerful shift in perspective.
Yeah.
You are not a human calculator. You are a psychologist.
That's the real secret.
So now you know how to break a buyer's stubborn script with a 63-cent loaf of bread and a brown paper bag. You know how to short-circuit the pattern monster and trigger a dopamine loop.
But this makes you wonder about the future.
It does. We are entering an era where artificial intelligence is about to perfectly automate every single spreadsheet, every flawless sales deck, and every logical, data-driven pitch you could ever conceive.
If AI can do all the logical parts perfectly.
Is raw, unpredictable, disruptive human emotion going to be the absolute last competitive advantage we have left? That is something you need to be thinking about as we head into our next deep dive.
It is the most important question in business right now. If you can't connect on an emotional level, you will be replaced by an algorithm that can do the math better than you.
Until then, the next time you feel that hot urge to argue with an objection, to pull out your data and fight back, pause, take a breath, and ask yourself, what is your version of the mysterious brown bag?
Picture this. It is a Tuesday afternoon.
Okay.
The weather outside is just entirely forgettable, just a mild gray kind of day. And you're running a totally mundane errand.
Right, just going through the motions.
Exactly. You are walking into your local liquor store, and you've got your mental checklist going, like maybe you need something for a dinner party, or you just want to grab a bottle of wine to unwind after staring at spreadsheets all day.
We've all been there.
Yeah. So you walk in, and the fluorescent lights overhead have that, that faint, low-level hum. The aisles are meticulously stocked, glossy bottles lined up row after row. But there is music playing in the background.
Okay.
And on this particular Tuesday, if you were to actually stop and actively listen, you'd realize they are playing traditional German Oompa music.
Wait, really? Like tubas and accordions?
Oh, full Oktoberfest energy. Tubas, accordions, the works.
Which is, I mean, completely out of place for a random
Ugh.
Tuesday. But the human brain is just incredible at filtering out background noise. You probably wouldn't even consciously register it.
Exactly. Your brain just pushes it right into the background. You wander the aisles, you deliberate for a moment, you grab a bottle, head to the register, pay, and walk out.
Simple enough.
Right. But now, let's reset the scene. Imagine it's Wednesday.
Okay, next day.
Same store, same aisles, same hum from those fluorescent lights. But today, management has swapped the playlist.
No more tubas.
No more tubas. Today, there is French cafe music drifting through the store, chanson, a little Edith Piaf, maybe some soft accordion, very Parisian.
Very elegant.
Yeah. And again, you're lost in your own thoughts. You don't really notice it. You grab your bottle, you pay, and you leave.
So on the surface, I mean, this sounds like the setup to an incredibly dry retail management seminar.
It really does.
But what you are describing is actually the foundation of one of the most revealing and frankly unnerving psychological experiments ever conducted on consumer behavior and human decision-making.
Unnerving is the perfect word for it. Cause the results completely shatter how we think we operate. When the researchers behind this study went in and actually looked at the register receipts, the numbers were staggering.
Like undeniable data.
Totally undeniable. On Tuesday, with the German beer hall music playing, sales of German beer and German wines absolutely skyrocketed. I mean, they dominated the day's sales.
Wow.
But then on Wednesday, with the French cafe music playing, French wine sales spiked massively. They just left everything else in the dust.
So the environmental trigger directly controlled the mass purchasing behavior.
Exactly. But here is the absolute best part. The twist that changes, well, basically everything about how we view business and human interaction.
Yeah, lay it on me.
The researchers weren't just looking at receipts. They were actually waiting outside on the sidewalk.
Oh, they ambushed them.
Yeah. As shoppers walked out, the researchers stopped them, peered into their brown paper bags, and asked a very simple, direct question. They asked, why did you buy that specific French wine? Or why did you choose that specific German beer?
And you would expect, I mean, at least a few of them to say, the music in there just put me in the mood for it.
Right. You'd think someone would notice. But not a single person mentioned the music.
Not one.
Zero. Not one shopper said, well, the tuba made me crave a Riesling.
That is wild.
Instead, they looked the researchers dead in the eye and gave perfectly logical, fiercely rational reasons.
Like what?
They said things like, oh, I'm cooking a heavy steak tonight, so I needed a robust red. Or, I saw a great review for this beer in a magazine last week and just wanted to try it.
Or, I just been really into the complex flavor profiles of European imports lately.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. They were utterly, genuinely convinced of their own logic.
Because they weren't lying to the researchers. They were lying to themselves. And they had absolutely no idea they were doing it.
None. Which brings us directly to the core tension we are exploring today. Every major decision you make in business, and every single decision your clients, your partners, your stakeholders, or your boss make about you is just as deeply fundamentally irrational. And yet, every single person involved in those high-stakes decisions will swear up and down with spreadsheets in hand that they are being perfectly logical.
It's an illusion. And in this deep dive, we are exploring the concept of the irrational buyer. We're drawing from the insights in Jeb Blount's work on sales EQ.
Right.
You're going to learn how to break through that collective delusion that business decisions are based on objective logic, and why mastering the emotional undercurrent of human interaction is, well, it's the ultimate competitive edge for any entrepreneur or professional.
I think we need to tackle that corporate delusion head on right away.
Yeah.
Because, if you walked into a Fortune 500 boardroom right now, looked a table full of executives in the eye, and told them that their multi-million-dollar supply chain decisions are essentially driven by the equivalent of background accordion music.
Oh, they would not like that.
You wouldn't just be laughed out of the room. You'd be escorted out by security.
Absolutely. The corporate world worships at the altar of logic.
We really do. We pride ourselves on our data, our ROI calculations, our quarterly projections, our KPIs.
Right, the spreadsheets.
We build entire identities around being these objective professionals. But this concept is telling us that the logical buyer, this mythical creature who weighs pros and cons evenly, is a complete fiction.
It is an absolute fiction.
Yeah.
And to understand why, We have to stop looking at business theory and actually start looking at evolutionary biology.
Okay, biology. How so?
It all comes down to the physical architecture of the human brain, how it processes information. We like to think of our brains as these slow, calculating supercomputers.
Right, like we're all Spock from Star Trek.
Exactly, but that's not how we evolved.
Yeah.
When you're presented with a choice, a new stimulus, or even just a person sitting across a negotiation table, the information doesn't go to your logical processing center first.
Where does it go?
It hits the emotional center of your brain, primarily the limbic system, and specifically the amygdala.
And the amygdala is incredibly fast, right? Like that's our ancient lizard brain threat detection system.
Precisely. It processes stimuli in milliseconds.
Hmm.
It evolved to keep us alive. Our ancestors saw a shadow in the grass. They didn't have time to run a logical analysis on whether it was a saber-toothed tiger or just the wind.
They just ran.
Right. The amygdala triggered immediate fear, and they ran. And today, that exact same biological hardware is reacting to business proposals, pricing structures, and salespeople.
Wow.
It reacts instantly to fear, to pleasure, to comfort, to the familiar, and to the unfamiliar. And that emotional reaction happens subconsciously, almost instantly.
Okay, so the emotion fires first.
Mm-hmm.
But where does all our beloved data and logic come in?
Well, logic lives primarily in the neocortex, specifically the prefrontal cortex. That part of the brain is evolutionarily much newer. It's responsible for executive function, complex reasoning, rational thought.
The smart stuff.
The smart stuff. But here is the catch. The neocortex is slow. It requires a massive amount of metabolic energy to run.
Right.
So the biological sequence is always this. The amygdala makes a lightning-fast emotional decision, and then milliseconds later, the neocortex is recruited to justify that decision.
Emotion decides, logic justifies.
Exactly.
I've always loved trying to visualize this internal dynamic because it feels like a bizarre corporate hierarchy inside our own heads.
How do you mean?
It's like our emotional brain, the amygdala, is the erratic, impulsive CEO of the company.
Okay, I like this.
Right. It's making all these massive executive decisions behind closed doors based on what feels right, what strokes its ego, or, what just looks shiny on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
And our logical brain, the neocortex, that's just the company's PR department.
That is brilliant. I'd actually take that analogy a step further.
Yeah.
The PR department doesn't even know the CEO is impulsive. The PR department genuinely believes it is in charge of the strategy.
That's terrifying and kind of hilarious.
It is.
It's like the CEO goes out and buys a wildly expensive, completely unnecessary corporate jet on a whim just because it makes them feel powerful and they want to show off to their rivals.
Exactly.
But you can't put the CEO has an ego problem in the annual report to the shareholders.
No, you definitely cannot.
So the PR department, the logical brain, goes into absolute overdrive. They scramble to draft a press release. They pull up spreadsheets. They write all this dense, impressive copy about maximizing executive travel efficiency and strategic tax write-offs.
Facilitating agile global synergy.
Yes, all those buzzwords. And the craziest part is the PR department reads their own press release and says, wow, what a brilliant, strategic, logical decision we made.
And that speaks to a very deep psychological necessity. Why does the brain do this? Why not just admit we are emotional creatures?
Why not?
Because human beings have a profound evolutionary need for our self-image to correlate with our decisions. We desperately want and need to see ourselves as smart, objective, rational actors in control of our own lives.
If we admitted the truth, it would break our self-image.
Completely. If an executive admits they chose a vendor because the salesperson's voice reminded them of their favorite uncle, or because the competitor's logo is a color they subconsciously dislike, they would feel ridiculous.
Yeah, you feel like a child.
Their self-image as a highly paid, objective professional would shatter. And this creates a state of cognitive dissonance.
Let's unpack cognitive dissonance for a second, because that term gets thrown around a lot, but the actual mechanics of it are crucial here.
Yeah, it's a big one. Cognitive dissonance is the severe mental stress or psychological pain you experience when you hold two contradictory beliefs or values at the same time.
Like what?
For example, I am a rational, data-driven professional versus I just made $1 million decision based on a gut feeling.
Ouch.
Right. The human brain hates that stress. It literally cannot tolerate cognitive dissonance. So to alleviate that pain and protect our ego, the PR department instantly invents logical justifications for our emotionally driven behaviors.
It just smooths over the contradiction.
Exactly. Yeah. And it does it so quickly and so seamlessly that we are entirely blind to the illusion. We truly believe the logic drove the bus.
We are totally blind to it. And the source material highlights these concrete examples that just blow your mind when you realize how pervasive this is across every aspect of life.
Oh, the examples are great.
Let's look at the famous Stanford wine study by Baba Shiv, because this takes the liquor store music experiment and just dials it up to a neurological level.
The price tag study. It's a classic for a reason, but the underlying neuroscience is what makes it so relevant to business.
Yeah, so the setup is this. Researchers invite people to a wine tasting. They sit them down and they pour a glass from a bottle that clearly has a $10 price tag on it.
Okay, cheap wine.
Cheap wine. The subjects taste it, evaluate it, take their notes. Then, a little later, the researchers pour a glass from a different bottle. And this one clearly has a $90 price tag on it.
The good stuff.
Allegedly. The subjects taste that one. And as you might guess, unanimously, the subjects rave about the $90 bottle.
Of course they do.
They become amateur sommeliers. They talk about the bold tannins, the complex finish, the subtle oak notes. They swear the expensive wine is vastly superior to the cheap one.
Right.
But here's the kicker, the absolute gut punch to human rationality. The researchers had literally poured the exact same cheap $10 wine into both bottles.
It's hilarious, but we have to be very careful here not to misunderstand the subject's behavior, because the instinctive reaction is to think, oh, those people were just being pretentious. They were lying to look sophisticated.
Right, they were just playing along for the researcher.
No, they weren't. And that's what's so fascinating. The researchers in these types of studies don't just ask for opinions. They put the subjects in fMRI machines.
Brain scanners.
Brain scanners. They scan their brains while they are tasting the wine. And the brain scans show that the pleasure centers of the brain, the areas associated with reward and sensory enjoyment, actually light up significantly more when the subjects believe they are drinking the $90 wine.
Wait, so you're saying their expectation actually changed their physical reality?
Yes. Their emotional expectation of quality driven by the logic-defying anchor of a high price tag literally altered their physical, sensory experience.
That is insane.
The PR department in their brain said, expensive equals good.
Yeah.
This is a high-status item. And their taste buds chemically followed orders. They genuinely experienced a better-tasting wine.
That is wild. It proves that our perception of value isn't an objective reality we observe. It's a reality our emotions construct for us.
Perfectly said.
And it happens in everyday, high-stakes purchases, too. There's an example in the text about a woman named Carrie who is out buying a car.
Ah, Carrie.
Now, buying a car is the second largest purchase most people make next to a home. You'd think logic would reign supreme.
You would hope so?
Right. So Carrie goes to a dealership, and the salesperson is just incredibly accommodating, not pushy at all, just deeply empathetic.
A rare find.
Exactly. He spends hours with her. He walks her across the massive asphalt lot in the blazing hot sun. He offers her cold water. He gets her coffee. He listens to her stories about her kids and her commute.
Building that connection.
Real connection. And Carrie ends up buying a car that isn't exactly the model she researched. And the color is definitely not her first choice. It's a compromise.
Now, if you stop Carrie as she's driving off the lot and ask her why she bought that specific car, what is she going to say?
Oh, she's going to sound like a mechanic. She'll say, well, you know, the highway mileage is slightly better than the other model. The safety ratings for side impacts are top of the class. And the financing rate they offered made long-term sense.
The PR department working flawlessly.
Flawlessly.
But what was the real emotional CEO's reason for the purchase?
Guilt. A profound sense of social obligation. She felt an emotional debt.
Yes.
She didn't want to let down this incredibly nice human being who had invested 3 hours of his life sweating in the sun just to help her. Her emotional need to avoid the social awkwardness of walking away, combined with the human desire to maintain a positive connection and reciprocate kindness, drove a massive multi-year financial commitment.
It's the law of reciprocity at its most potent. And we see this scale up to the absolute highest levels of global finance, too. I mean, you mentioned the boardroom earlier. Let's look at the stock market.
Okay, let's go there.
You'd think the stock market is the ultimate impenetrable fortress of cold, hard logic, right?
I mean, it's all PE ratios, algorithmic trading, quarterly earnings reports. It has to be logical.
But the text brings up an example of an investor named John buying a stock. And John buys a stock simply because the company's name is easy to pronounce.
That sounds absurd. You're telling me people risk their retirement funds on phonetics?
They absolutely do. It's a heavily documented cognitive bias known as the fluency heuristic.
The fluency heuristic. Let's break that down for the listener.
Okay, so from an evolutionary standpoint, our brains are inherently lazy.
Yeah.
They want to conserve metabolic energy. We naturally prefer things that are easy to process, easy to understand, and easy to pronounce.
Makes sense.
If a company's name or its stock ticker is simple and fluent, let's say something like Apple, versus some unpronounceable string of consonants, our brain processes it with zero friction.
Right.
That lack of cognitive friction creates a very subtle subconscious feeling of pleasure, safety, and familiarity.
So the emotional brain, the CEO, looks at the easy name and says, I like this. This feels safe. No red flags here.
Exactly. And the moment that emotional green light flashes, what happens next?
The PR department kicks in.
The logical PR department immediately goes to work. The investor starts reading the prospectus, looking at the charts, and they will inevitably find a few positive metrics.
Right, like a recent uptick in revenue or solid new product launch.
Exactly, just to justify the purchase. They ignore the red flags because the emotional decision to trust the company has already been made.
Okay, so if we accept this, if we accept that the music, the price tag, the guilt, and the fluency heuristic are actually running the show, what does this mean for the listener?
That's the big question.
Because the practical takeaway here is massive. If you are going into a negotiation, trying to close a massive deal, or even just trying to persuade your partner to go to your favorite restaurant, and you just hammer them with spreadsheets, data points, and airtight logical arguments, you are only talking to the PR department.
Yep.
And the PR department doesn't have the authority to make the decision. If you ignore the emotional CEO in your client's head, all the flawless data in the world is completely useless. You have to address the emotion first.
But I know exactly what a segment of the audience is thinking right now,
Oh, I bet you do.
because this concept always triggers a very specific, very defensive counterargument, particularly from professionals who operate in complex B2B enterprise environments.
Oh, absolutely. The B2B veterans are rolling their eyes right now. So let's lean into that. Allow me to put on my skeptical listener hat, maybe channel a seasoned procurement director for a second, and really push back on this premise, because it sounds a little too simple.
Please do. Have at it.
Okay, wait a minute. Are we really sitting here saying that product features, quality, technical specs, and price don't matter at all? Let's get real here. I sell highly complex enterprise software to Fortune 500 CFOs. Or, I'm pitching a massive multi-year supply chain logistics overhaul.
High-stakes stuff.
Huge stakes. These companies have literal procurement departments. They use 50-point weighted scorecards explicitly designed to strip every ounce of emotion out of the buying process. They have boards of directors to report to, internal audits. They absolutely cannot and will not buy my $10 million software platform because I played nice music in the lobby or because my company name is easy to pronounce.
Right.
In that arena, logic must rule the day, right? The scorecard makes the decision.
It is a vital pushback. And it's the exact reason why so many professionals reject this psychology outright. But it's a misunderstanding of how emotion and logic actually interact. The source material is very careful to clarify this nuance. It is absolutely not saying that features, price, technical specs, delivery capabilities, and SLAs don't matter. They matter immensely.
Okay.
But here is the critical paradigm-shifting distinction. Those logical, tangible attributes are merely tickets to the game.
Tickets to the game. Explain how that works against the 50-point weighted scorecard.
Think of it this way. If your enterprise software doesn't have the necessary SOC 2 security compliance, or if your pricing is literally 10 times the market rate, you don't even get allowed into the stadium.
Right. The bouncer at the door says no.
Exactly.
Right.
The procurement department's logical scorecard will bounce you out in the first round. A deficiency in those tangible logical attributes eliminates you immediately. So yes, you absolutely need the logic to qualify.
Right.
But, and this is the turning point that B2B professionals miss, when all things are equal, those tangible attributes do not make the final decision. And let's be brutally honest about today's modern globalized market.
Everyone's good.
Exactly. Competitors are usually very, very similar. From the buyer's perspective, your cutting-edge software and your top 3 competitor software probably look 95% identical.
It's true. Everyone has a slick user interface now. Everyone has cloud integration, 24/7 support, AI-driven analytics. The baseline for quality is higher than ever. which means differentiation based purely on features is almost impossible.
Exactly. So if 5 different vendors have the tickets to the game, if all 5 of you score a 45 out of 50 on that weighted scorecard, how does the buyer choose?
Huh?
Even within the rigid structure of procurement, who decided how those 50 points were weighted in the first place? A human with emotions. When the logical attributes tie, the emotional brain steps in to break the tie.
That makes total sense.
And this reality leads to one of the most agonizing, maddening scenarios in the professional world. We can call it the tragedy of the frustrated salesperson.
Oh man, the frustrated salesperson. This scenario is so relatable it physically hurts. I've lived this.
Let me paint the picture for you because I think everyone listening has been in these shoes at least once.
Go for it.
You are the frustrated salesperson. You are going after a massive account. You have poured your heart, your soul, and your nights and weekends into this prospect for 8 months.
Sweating over it.
Oh, losing sleep.
Yeah.
You've done deep discovery. You've mapped their entire organization. You have built the ultimate undeniable business case. Your ROI calculations are objectively better than the competition.
The math is flawless.
Flawless. Your references are impeccable, glowing testimonials. Furthermore, you know for a fact, because the client has actually complained to you about it, that their current incumbent vendor is terrible.
The worst.
The competitor had a history of shoddy service, their tech goes down, they overbill, they are an absolute headache.
So it's a slam dunk. It should be. So you go into the final presentation, you lay out your flawless logical case. It is bulletproof. The math adds up perfectly. And then the prospect thanks you for your time and stays with the terrible incumbent competitor.
Ouch. It drives logical professionals completely crazy. It feels fundamentally unjust. It feels like the universe is broken.
It does. You just want to grab the prospect by the shoulders and shake them and yell, "Look at the spreadsheet. They are actively robbing you. I am offering you salvation, and you are choosing to stay in misery.
Yeah.
Why does this happen? How can we explain a buyer making a decision that is objectively, demonstrably contrary to their own best financial interests?"
Because you are looking at the spreadsheet, and they're looking at their internal emotional landscape. When you lose that deal, it wasn't because your math was wrong.
Yeah.
It was because you failed to identify the emotional current pulling them away.
Okay, so what's pulling them away?
Let's peel back the layers of that specific lost deal. The buyer isn't looking at your flawless ROI. Subconsciously, they might be terrified of making a mistake. Buying from a new vendor, even a seemingly perfect one, involves risk.
The risk of the unknown.
Exactly. Think about the internal politics for that buyer. If they stick with the devil they know, the bad incumbent vendor, and the service continues to be mediocre, well, it's just the status quo. Nobody gets fired for maintaining the status quo.
Right, it's safe.
But if that buyer sticks their neck out, advocates for a massive migration to your platform, and something goes wrong during implementation, now it's their fault. Now their job is on the line.
So it's not about the software at all. It's a primal fear of blame. It's the amygdala screaming, "Do not step out of line. It's not safe."
Exactly. Or let's look at a different emotional barrier.
Yeah.
Perhaps the buyer has a deep-seated, personality-driven desire to avoid conflict.
Okay, conflict avoidance.
Firing their current vendor requires a very difficult, uncomfortable conversation. For a highly conflict-avoidant personality, the chronic, low-level pain of shoddy service is actually preferable to the acute, terrifying emotional pain of a confrontation with their current account manager.
Wow. They will literally cost their company money just to avoid an awkward phone call.
Happens every day. Or maybe it's even simpler and more subtle than that. Maybe there's just something about you.
Me.
Yeah, maybe your tone of voice was a little too polished. Maybe you pushed a little too hard on a Friday afternoon. Maybe your urgency triggered a subconscious lack of trust. The buyer's amygdala just whispered, "I don't feel safe with this person."
But the devastating part is they will never, ever say that to you. They aren't going to call you up and say, "Hey, your product is great, but I'm deeply insecure about my standing in the company, and I'm terrified of getting fired if your implementation fails."
Never. The PR department steps in. If you ask them why they stayed with the bad vendor, they will give you a list of highly sanitized, logical reasons. They'll say, "Oh, we reviewed the proposal, but the transition costs were just a little too high for Q3, or we decided to hold off until the new fiscal year to better align our internal tech stack."
The PR department working overtime to cover for the terrified CEO.
Exactly. And here is where 90% of average salespeople fail entirely. They try to argue with the PR department.
Oh, I've done that.
They hear the objection about transition costs.
Yeah.
They pull out their calculator and they fire back, no, look, you're looking at it wrong. The transition costs are fully offset by the efficiency gains in month 3.
And it goes nowhere.
It is utterly useless. You cannot argue a stakeholder out of a position they didn't logically arrive at in the first place.
It's like arguing with a brick wall. So the practical takeaway here for you, the listener, is this. When you hit a wall of illogical resistance from a client, a partner, or anyone you are negotiating with, you have to stop arguing the facts. Stop pointing at the spreadsheet. The facts they are giving you are just a smokescreen. You have to take a step back, pause, and look for the hidden emotional barrier. Is it fear of failure? Is it comfort zone? Is it an internal relationship dynamic you weren't privy to? Is it a lack of trust in you?
You have to play detective.
Exactly. Once you identify the actual emotional roadblock, you can start addressing that directly. You reassure their fear, you lower the perceived risk, rather than banging your head against their spreadsheet.
Which transitions us into an uncomfortable truth about our own professions. It brings us to the next key idea, the secret ingredient, and what the source material refers to as facing the poetry.
This is a great point, because if what we are saying is true, if emotions are the real deciders and logic is just the justification, why doesn't every single sales training program, every marketing seminar, and every leadership retreat focus entirely on this?
That's a fair question.
Why are we all so obsessed with teaching features, benefits, and rigid processes?
Because of what the author describes as a massive collective delusion in the business world. Sales professionals, marketing teams, and corporate trainers aggressively maintain this delusion because the alternative is terrifying.
Terrifying how?
Think about it. It is vastly, infinitely easier to memorize the technical specs of a new software widget or to memorize a rigid step-by-step sales methodology than it is to tune into the messy, complex, highly unpredictable emotions of a living, breathing human being sitting across the table from you.
It's all about the illusion of control. A spreadsheet behaves. A feature list doesn't change its mind.
Right.
A 10-step sales process gives you a false sense of security that if you just follow the steps, you will get the result. But a human being who had a fight with their spouse this morning is worried about a looming round of layoffs and has a hidden fear of change. They don't behave. They don't follow your flowchart.
They absolutely do not.
There is a quote from the source material that just brilliantly encapsulates this. It references a line from the movie The Big Short, and the quote is, "The truth is like poetry, but people feffing hate poetry."
It's a profound analogy for human interaction. Poetry is nuanced. It's highly subjective. It requires interpretation, deep empathy, and a willingness to sit with ambiguity.
You can't put poetry into an Excel formula.
No, you can't. Spreadsheets, on the other hand, are like math. In math, there is one right answer. It's clean, it's objective, and it's safe. But human decision-making isn't math. It's poetry.
And a lot of very smart, very capable professionals hate that reality.
They do, because it means their technical expertise, their degrees, and their product knowledge aren't enough to guarantee success. It levels the playing field in a way that makes them deeply uncomfortable.
And this reality really challenges some of the dominant, highly celebrated sales methodologies of the last decade or two. The text specifically calls out approaches like the challenger sale or insight selling.
Yeah, those are massive in B2B.
Right. And for listeners who might not be in the B2B trenches every day, these are immensely popular methodologies where the core premise is that the salesperson should act as a disruptive expert.
You're supposed to shake things up.
Exactly. You are supposed to walk in, challenge the buyer's assumptions, show them the hidden flaws in their business model, and essentially teach them how they are doing it wrong and how your solution is the only way to do it right. It's a very assertive, intellectually dominant approach.
And those methodologies certainly have value, and they look brilliant on paper. But, as the author points out, their entire house of cards collapses instantly if they are executed without a high degree of emotional intelligence.
How so?
Think about the emotional dynamic. If you walk into a meeting with a buyer who is already feeling overwhelmed, slightly insecure about their department's performance, or just highly stressed, and you immediately start pontificating to them,
Oof.
if you aggressively challenge them and effectively tell them they are doing it all wrong, you are completely ignoring human nature.
You might be 100% factually correct about their business flaws, but emotionally, you are attacking their ego. You are humiliating them in their own office.
Exactly. You're triggering their amygdala to view you as a threat. And the universal truth of business is this. People do not buy from people who make them feel stupid.
Never.
It does not matter how brilliant your insights are. If your challenge makes them feel inferior or attacked, their emotional PR department will find a dozen logical reasons to reject your proposal.
Which brings us to the ultimate rule of this entire chapter. If you write down one sentence from this entire deep dive, it should be this phrase: people buy for their reasons, not yours.
Let that really sink in, because it is the antithesis of how we naturally operate.
Right.
People buy for their reasons, not yours.
It sounds so simple, almost like a cliche, but it is completely unnatural to execute.
Yeah.
When I have a product to sell, or an idea to pitch to my team, or even a vacation destination to pitch to my spouse, I am entirely consumed by my reasons. My product is faster. My idea is more innovative. I have a quota to hit this month. I want the commission check. I want the glory of closing the big account.
Human nature.
But the harsh truth is, the person sitting across the table doesn't care about a single one of those things. They don't care about your quota. They don't care how innovative your engineers are.
So what do they care about?
They care about their own promotion. They care about reducing their daily stress levels. They care about going home on time on Friday. They care about not looking foolish in front of their boss.
And this is where true sales, EQ, emotional intelligence in the context of influence becomes your greatest asset. Before you open your mouth to pitch a single feature, you have to pause and ask yourself, whose reasons am I fulfilling right now?
Such a powerful question.
If you are just reciting a polished corporate script or aggressively dropping insights because it makes you feel smart and prepared, you are failing. You must do the incredibly hard, poetic work of discovering the listener's internal narrative.
You have to figure out their story.
What is the story they are currently telling themselves? What is their emotional state? You have to adapt your approach to fit their reality, rather than trying to brute force their reality to fit your predetermined script.
And understanding how to adapt to their reality leads to this incredible visualization in the book. If you're listening right now, whether you're driving or cooking, I want you to try to picture a graph in your mind's eye.
This graph is crucial.
The author calls it the seller versus buyer collision, and I think it perfectly visually illustrates why we get human interactions so wrong so often. Let's unpack this out-of-sync collision.
This is one of the most powerful mental models you can adopt. Imagine a standard graph. The horizontal x-axis along the bottom represents time moving forward, from the first hello to the final signature on a contract.
Okay, time on the bottom. Got it.
The vertical y-axis represents the state of mind. At the very bottom of the y-axis, you have pure, cold logic. At the very top of the y-axis, you have high emotion.
Okay, I've got the picture. Time moves left to right. Bottom is cold logic. Top is high emotion.
Now let's trace the buyer's journey on this graph. When a buyer enters a brand new interaction, the very first discovery meeting or picking up a cold call, where do you think they are on that vertical axis?
Well, I mean, instinctively, I would think they are logical at the beginning, trying to figure out what the product does, what the price is, gathering facts.
That's the logical assumption. But it ignores biology. They actually start at the absolute top. They are highly emotional.
Really? At the very beginning?
Yes. At the very beginning of an interaction with a stranger, the human brain is not asking, what are the technical specs of this widget? The human brain is asking one fundamental, primal, deeply subconscious question. Do I like you?
Do I like you?
Are you safe? Are you a threat? Are you going to waste my time? Are you annoying? Do you seem trustworthy? They were entirely operating on emotional instinct and threat detection.
That makes sense.
But as time goes on and the relationship progresses, if you pass that emotional test, the buyer's line moves diagonally downward on the graph. They move away from pure emotion and toward logic.
Okay.
By the end of the process, when it's time to actually sign a contract and commit funds, the buyer's heavily focused on logic, calculating the exact risk, negotiating the final price, formulating rational objections, making sure the terms and conditions are safe.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. The buyer starts high on emotion. Do I like you? Are you safe? And ends low on logic. What is the exact ROI and exit clause? Now, what about the seller's journey on this same graph?
The seller's trajectory is the exact opposite.
Uh-oh.
The seller walks into that very first meeting and starts at the absolute bottom of the graph, purely logical. They open their laptop, bring up a 40-page slide deck, and immediately start pitching product features, technical specifications, data points, and a timeline of their company's history.
Oh, man. I am actively cringing right now because I have done this so many times. The buyer is sitting there, subconsciously feeling out the vibe, asking, do I even like this person? Do they understand my world?
Yep.
And I'm sitting there completely oblivious saying, Our new platform utilizes a 4.5 gigahertz processor and integrates seamlessly with your legacy APIs via a custom webhook.
Exactly. You are answering a highly complex logical question they haven't even thought to ask yet, while completely ignoring the primal emotional question they desperately need answered before they can even hear your logic.
That is brutal.
But the tragedy of the graph gets worse. As time goes on and the deal nears the finish line, the seller's line moves diagonally upward toward high emotion.
Because they want the deal.
Exactly. As the close approaches, the seller becomes desperate not to lose the deal. They start feeling the intense pressure of their quarterly quota. They start taking the buyer's logical objections personally and feel perceived rejection. They become a highly emotional, anxious, reactive wreck.
So you have these two lines forming a massive X right in the middle of the graph. They are perpetually out of sync.
It's a complete tragedy of human interaction.
Think about the mismatch. When the buyer is high on emotion at the start and desperately wants a human connection and a sense of safety, the seller is acting like a cold, robotic calculator.
Right.
And later, when the buyer is finally ready for the cold, hard logic to reassure their decision and finalize the risk assessment, the seller is sweating, acting defensive, pushing for the close, and reeking of emotional desperation.
The author makes a brilliant observation here. Few things make a seller more unlikable than pitching too early. When you launch into a massive feature dump while the buyer is still in that early emotional threat detection phase, you guarantee that an emotional wall goes up. The industry slang for this is getting pitch slapped.
Pitch slapped. I love that phrase because it captures exactly how jarring it feels. It feels aggressive. It feels like someone is forcing their agenda down your throat before they've earned the basic human right to do so.
That's exactly what it is.
It reminds me of the worst first date imaginable. Imagine going on a first date, you sit down at a coffee shop, and before you've even taken a sip of your latte, the other person pulls out a printed resume.
Oh, no.
And they start listing their salary history, their 401k matching options, and their 5-year strategic life plan. You're just sitting there thinking, whoa, I don't even know if I want to spend the next 45 minutes with you, let alone the rest of my life. Put the spreadsheet away and talk to me like a human being.
That is a perfect visceral analogy.
Oh.
In that coffee shop scenario, the person with the resume is applying end-stage logical criteria to an early-stage emotional evaluation. And we do it in business every single day.
We really do.
So the ultimate practical takeaway for our listener navigating this collision is this. You must map your interactions to the buyer's timeline, not your own desperate quota timeline.
But how do we actually execute that in practice? It's so hard when you're under pressure to perform.
You have to consciously override your own PR department. In those early stages of a relationship, you must actively suppress your burning urge to prove how smart you are with data.
Put the resume away.
Put the slide deck away. Focus entirely on human connection, likability, and building a foundation of trust. Ask deep, open-ended questions. Practice aggressive, active listening. Let them talk about their problems, their frustrations, their vision. Satisfy their emotional brain's primal question of, do I like you?
Establish the safety first.
Yes. Only when you have firmly established that emotional foundation and you feel them relax into the relationship, do you slowly introduce the logic. Save the hard data, the ROI defense, and the technical specs for the end of the process.
Because that's when they actually want it.
Exactly, because at the end of the process, their logical brain, their PR department, is frantically looking for that exact information to justify the emotional decision they've already made to trust you.
So we are essentially acting as ghostwriters. We are providing the buyer's PR department with the brilliant, airtight talking points for their internal press release, but we only hand them the script after we've already convinced their internal CEO to buy the jet.
That is exactly it. You are perfectly aligning your external sales process with their internal biological buying process.
Okay, let's step back and synthesize all of this. What is the soul of this chapter? For me, pulling together the liquor store, the wine tasting, the frustrated salesperson, and that massive X on the graph, it comes down to one core, memorable insight that absolutely shatters a lot of the corporate jargon we rely on.
What's that?
We hear constantly about B2B sales business to business or B2C sales business to consumer. We divide the world into these neat little logical categories. But what Jeb Blount is really arguing here, and what the biology proves, is that business is not B2B. It's not B2C. It is strictly, undeniably H2H. Human to human.
Human to human,
Yeah.
yes. That is the inescapable reality.
Whether you are negotiating a $10 million corporate software contract across a polished mahogany boardroom table in Manhattan, or you are deciding between a French wine and a German beer on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in a fluorescent lit liquor store, the fundamental biological mechanics of the decision are identical.
It's all the same hardware.
The transaction is governed by an emotional brain that is desperate for significance, safety, and connection. And that emotional brain then hires a logical brain to furiously defend its choices. If you only speak to the logical brain, you are screaming at the PR department, and you will never influence the decision maker.
And that realization is the absolute essence of what sales EQ truly is. It's not just being a nice person.
Right.
It is the highly disciplined ability to manage your own disruptive emotions, like that anxious desperation to pitch your features or the fear of a quota, while simultaneously tuning into and actively addressing the buyer's hidden emotional state.
It's a superpower.
In a world where every competitor has similar features and similar pricing, the tangible stuff is just a ticket to the stadium. Mastering that human-to-human emotional landscape, the poetry of the interaction, is the absolute separator between average performers who struggle and ultra-high performers who dominate their fields.
It really is a paradigm shift. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. You start looking at every meeting, every email, every pitch, not as a sterile data exchange, but as an exercise in emotional navigation.
Absolutely. It changes how you view every interaction in your life.
But of course, resolving this just leads us to a massive, lingering question.
There's always another question.
If the logical brain is mostly an illusion, and the emotional brain is making all these split-second decisions behind the curtain, how exactly does that emotional brain decide what to pay attention to in the first place? In a world bombarded by infinite noise, infinite advertisements, and infinite salespeople, how does the emotional CEO decide what is a threat and what is an opportunity?
That is exactly the mystery we are diving into next. Next time, we're going to explore the pattern monster that lives inside all of our heads.
A pattern monster.
We'll unpack the deep cognitive biases and mental heuristics that filter our reality. And we'll explore why doing exactly what is expected of you in a professional setting is actually the most dangerous, self-sabotaging thing you can possibly do.
Oh, I cannot wait for that. Doing what's expected is dangerous. We love a good counterintuitive truth here. It turns everything on its head. Until then, though, a little homework for you. Pay very close attention to the ambient music playing in the background the next time you make a perfectly logical purchase. You might be very surprised to discover who is really pulling the strings. What if the very thing that made you so incredibly successful in school, your sheer unadulterated brain power, is exactly what's silently killing your most important business deals today?
Yeah, I mean, it really feels like a betrayal of everything we are taught growing up, right?
Oh, 100%.
Because we spend our entire childhoods being conditioned to believe that the smartest person in the room always wins.
You get the A, you get the gold star, you get the job.
Exactly. But when you step into the messy, highly complex arena of human influence and, modern sales, relying solely on that raw intellect can actually become your most dangerous liability.
I am so glad we are digging into this because it's just such a fascinating paradox.
It really is.
So in this deep dive, we are unpacking a framework for you called the 4 levels of sales intelligence. It's a blueprint that reveals why some professionals just completely crush it in the marketplace, while others, who might be objectively smarter on paper, just stall out.
They just hit a wall.
Right, they plateau. We are going to explore how mastering 4 distinct types of intelligence, so that's innate, acquired, technological, and emotional, creates this unshakable competitive edge for anyone in business.
And the material we were looking at draws a very clear line in the sand between average performers and what it calls ultra-high performers, or UHPs.
UHPs, got it.
Right. These are the individuals operating at the absolute top of the food chain in their respective industries. And what sets them apart isn't just that they possess these 4 intelligences.
Right, it's not just having them.
Exactly. It's that they deeply understand the mechanics of how to balance them. They know when to rely on their raw brain power and, arguably more importantly, when to dial it back.
When to put it in check. So let's start right at the foundation, which is innate intelligence, or IQ.
The baseline.
Yeah. When we talk about IQ in this context, we are really talking about the biological hardware you were born with, right? Your DNA dictates this.
Yes, your intelligence quotient is a fixed biological baseline. You can think of it like your cognitive capacity or your raw processing power.
Like the CPU in a computer.
Exactly like that. Just as someone might be born with the physiological traits to be, say, a world-class sprinter, you are born with a certain capacity for intellectual processing.
Right.
And we shouldn't downplay it. Having a high IQ is a massive advantage. The research is very clear that ultra-high performers are undeniably smart people.
They have that high cognitive hardware.
They absolutely do.
And they would have to, right? Because the modern marketplace isn't some static environment anymore.
Not at all.
The speed at which business moves today requires you to process information almost instantly. So exactly how does this raw processing power manifest in a real business setting?
Well, it looks like extreme intellectual agility.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
People with above-average IQs are, first of all, insatiably curious.
Yeah.
When they are placed in a complex business scenario, they can rapidly assimilate massive amounts of totally disorganized information.
Like taking a giant mess of data and just making sense of it instantly.
Right. They have this innate ability to hold the big picture in their mind
Yeah.
while simultaneously, diving into the minutia.
That's a rare skill.
It is. But the real magic, especially in sales or entrepreneurship, is their superior reasoning skills. They can perceive relationships among seemingly unrelated objects or ideas or market trends.
So they are essentially connecting dots that everyone else in the room didn't even realize were on the same page.
They are looking at disparate pieces of data, maybe a shift in the supply chain, a sudden change in consumer behavior, and, I don't know, a new piece of legislation.
Stuff that seems totally disconnected.
Exactly. And they mash that information up to develop completely original, elegant solutions.
Wow.
If your job is to challenge the status quo and solve highly complex systemic problems for a client, you absolutely need that intellectual horsepower to even play the game.
But wait, this brings us back to the contradiction we opened with, right?
The paradox, yeah.
Because society, our schooling, corporate culture, they all basically worship at the altar of the high IQ.
Oh, absolutely.
Being the smartest person in the room is universally treated as the ultimate goal. So are we really saying that having this massive processing power is a disadvantage?
Well, to understand the limitation, we have to look at a quote from Carl Jung that the source material brings up.
Oh, I love this quote.
It's so good. He said, "We should not pretend to understand the world only by the intellect. The judgment of the intellect is only part of the truth."
The judgment of the intellect is only part of the truth. I mean, that is a heavy concept to just drop into a conversation about sales strategy.
It is, but it hits hard because it exposes the ultimate blind spot of highly intelligent people.
Which is what?
Because their brains process information, connect disparate ideas, and formulate rational arguments at such a ridiculously high speed, they are highly prone to damaging the very relationships they need to succeed.
The dark side.
The dark side of high IQ is very real. When you approach a human being as if they are just a math problem to be solved efficiently, things go south quickly.
Okay, let's unpack the mechanics of that. Because it sounds like having this massive IQ without any other balancing forces is like, well, it's like dropping a Formula One engine into a car, but you just never bothered to learn how to steer.
That analogy perfectly captures the tension.
Right. You have all this acceleration, but no handling. You're just going to get to the craft site a lot faster.
Yes. You have acceleration, but no control. And when we look at the specific pitfalls of this dark side outlined in the text, impulsiveness and impatience are right at the very top of the list.
Let me guess. Because their brain has already calculated the solution while the client is only like halfway through explaining their problem?
That is the exact mechanism at play. The high IQ individual's mind is already 10 steps ahead.
In the future.
They are. They have mapped out the solution, the implementation strategy, and the ROI before the client has even put a period on their sentence.
That sounds exhausting for everyone involved.
And because their brain is just idling, waiting for everyone else to catch up, they become visibly impatient.
Oh, I've seen that.
This leads to them talking down to people, talking over people, and fundamentally failing to listen. They aren't hearing the client out because they feel they already possess the answer.
I can visualize this perfectly. I mean, we have all been in a meeting where someone is doing this.
Oh, definitely.
They are brilliant, objectively speaking, but they are absolutely bulldozing the room. They are tapping their pen, shifting in their seat, just waiting for the other person to stop making noise so they can deliver their genius thesis.
And in doing so, they completely fail to empathize.
Because they're just waiting to speak.
Right. They are approaching the business interaction as a cold, rational puzzle. A client might be expressing, say, genuine anxiety about a new software implementation.
A very human reaction.
Very human. And the high IQ salesperson responds with a spreadsheet proving why that anxiety is statistically illogical.
Which, as anyone who has ever been a human being knows, is the worst possible way to handle someone's anxiety.
It never works.
You cannot spreadsheet away a feeling.
You absolutely cannot. And the final pitfall mentioned in the text is perhaps the most common one we see, overwhelming people with elaborate solutions to really basic problems.
Why do they do that? Just to show off?
Not necessarily. A high IQ brain just craves complexity. It literally gets a dopamine hit from solving intricate puzzles.
Oh, interesting.
So when a client presents a simple problem, the highly intelligent person will often overcomplicate the solution because the simple fix is just boring to them.
They miss the obvious because it's too easy.
They completely miss the fact that the client doesn't want a masterpiece.
Right.
They just want the leak in the roof patched.
If you are listening to this and recognizing yourself in any of these behaviors, it's a massive wake-up call.
It has to be.
You have to actively audit your own intellectual blind spots. Because if you catch yourself impatiently waiting for a stakeholder to finish speaking just so you can drop a quote-unquote brilliant solution on them, you are letting your IQ damage your win probability.
You are.
You are letting that Formula One car drift straight into the wall.
And the underlying truth here is that intellect alone is insufficient because human beings make decisions based on emotion. And then they justify those decisions with logic.
Emotion first, logic second.
Always. If you rely entirely on your fixed IQ, you will inevitably hit a ceiling in your career.
Because you can't logic someone into trusting you.
Precisely. And since innate intelligence is static, you are quite literally as smart right now as you will ever be biologically. We have to look at the intelligences we actually have the power to change to balance the scales.
Okay, so if the raw processing power is fixed and it's prone to causing these interpersonal crashes, then ultra-high performers must be relying on a different type of intelligence to actually navigate the road, which moves us away from what we are born with to what we can build. The second level, acquired intelligence, or AQ.
Acquired intelligence is entirely dynamic. It's not fixed at all.
So what exactly is it?
It is the accumulated knowledge, the skills, and the wisdom you gather over a lifetime. It is honed through formal schooling, intense training, reading, deliberate practice, facing adversity, and accumulating real-world experience.
So it's everything you've learned.
Yes. If IQ is your raw processing power, AQ is the database of information that your processor actually runs on.
Got it.
Raw IQ without robust AQ is just completely untapped potential.
It's the difference between having a supercomputer with a blank hard drive versus one loaded with cutting-edge software.
That's exactly it.
And the text has a really illuminating story about this gap between potential and acquired knowledge. It's that anecdote about the break room.
It's a very grounded, revealing scenario.
Walk us through it.
So the author of the source material was brought into a company as a consultant, and the sales manager asked him to spend some time with a failing sales rep.
Okay, a guy who's struggling.
Really struggling. The manager's assessment was that this rep had tremendous innate potential, likely a solid IQ, a good presence, but his performance was just absolutely tanking.
So all the hardware, none of the results.
Exactly. So the author sits down with this struggling rep in the company break room to see what's going on.
Now wait, how does a conversation like that usually start? Because I imagine there's a lot of defensive-ness when someone comes in to fix you.
Oh, it was a masterclass in deflection.
I bet.
The rep immediately launched into a litany of excuses. He blamed the territory he was assigned, claiming it was totally tapped out.
Classic.
Right. He blamed the quality of the marketing leads. He blamed the product pricing, saying it was way too high for the current economy.
Basically everyone's fault but his own.
He blamed management. He blamed everything and everyone except his own methodology.
After sitting through that avalanche of excuses, how did the author actually respond to him?
Well, he took a very practical approach. He diagnosed that the rep simply lacked the acquired knowledge, the AQ, to navigate these objections.
He just didn't have the skills yet.
Right. So he offered a lifeline. He suggested a specific book on sales strategy and a couple of highly tactical podcasts that he believed would genuinely help the rep turn his numbers around.
He essentially handed him the exact tools needed to build his AQ.
Here you go. Here's how you fix it.
And how was his lifeline received?
The rep looked at him and said, flat out, I don't like to read and podcasts aren't for me.
Oh, man. That is almost physically painful to hear.
It's brutal.
The guy is drowning, an expert throws him a life preserver, and he refuses to grab it because he doesn't like the texture of the rope.
That is exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And the tragedy of it is compounded by another observation the author made just a week later.
What was that?
He was delivering a 2-day intensive seminar for a different group. And in a room filled with highly engaged professionals who were taking furious notes, there were 2 participants sitting in the back with their arms crossed.
Just completely checked out.
They were totally disengaged, projecting a vibe of outright hostility toward the training.
Let me guess, they were also the ones missing their quotas.
Exactly that.
Mm.
At lunch, the author asked the sales leader about those 2 specific individuals.
And what did the leader say?
The leader sighed and admitted that both guys were struggling terribly to hit their numbers. But their attitude was that they, quote-unquote, knew it all already.
Of course.
They'd complained bitterly about being forced to attend the seminar in the first place.
It is such a bizarre paradox.
Isn't it?
The individuals who are in the most desperate need of new knowledge are the ones actively, aggressively pushing it away.
Yes.
While the top performers, who probably could have skipped the seminar, honestly, are the ones in the front row taking notes.
Always.
What is the mechanism behind this? Why do some people have a relentless drive to accumulate knowledge, while others just fold their arms and refuse to learn?
To understand the why behind that behavior, we have to look at a foundational psychological concept called the locus of control.
Locus of control. I have heard that thrown around in, like, pop psychology or therapy contexts. But how does it actually apply to a business professional losing a deal or refusing to read a book?
Well, it is perhaps the single greatest psychological differentiator between your average, struggling rep and an ultra-high performer.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Your locus of control is your internal belief system regarding what forces dictate the outcomes of your life.
Who's in the driver's seat, basically?
Exactly. If you operate with an external locus of control, you fundamentally believe that you are at the mercy of outside forces.
So things happen to you.
Right. You believe your success or failure is determined by luck, chance, the economy, your boss, or, the algorithm.
That perfectly explains the psychological safety of the guy in the break room.
It protects his ego.
Right, because if it's the territory's fault or the pricing's fault, then his failure isn't a reflection of his own competence.
Bingo.
It is neurologically safer to blame the outside world than to admit your own inadequacy.
You've hit on the exact mechanism. It is purely a defense mechanism for the ego. But the consequence of that defense mechanism is total stagnation.
Because you never grow.
Think about it. If you genuinely believe that outside forces dictate your success, why on earth would you bother reading a book on sales tactics?
What's the point?
Exactly. Why would you study? In your mind, nothing you do will change the outcome anyway, so learning is just a waste of energy.
But the ultra-high performers operate on the other end of the spectrum.
Completely opposite. They operate with an intense internal locus of control.
Meaning they believe they are the ones driving.
They believe that they are the architects of their own circumstances. They believe that their choices, their effort, and their accumulated knowledge determine their outcomes.
If they lose, it's on them.
If they lose, it's on them. If they win, it's on them.
The implication here is staggering when you really think about it.
It changes everything.
By choosing not to invest in your own self-development, by choosing to blame the external world, you are making a conscious, active choice to cap your own income.
You are choosing your own plateau.
You really are.
And because UHPs have this internal locus, their behavior is entirely different. They have an insatiable, almost obsessive thirst for knowledge.
They want to know
They seek out every possible opportunity to learn. They are highly coachable. They actively welcome critical feedback because they view it as, like, raw data they can use to upgrade their AQ.
It must completely change how they process failure, too.
It changes the neurochemistry of failure.
How so?
An average performer experiences a lost deal as a massive threat to their ego and immediately looks for a scapegoat.
The client was crazy.
Exactly. But an ultra-high performer views that same lost deal as a forensic learning opportunity.
He dissects it.
They look inward. They ask, what data was I missing? Where was the gap in my acquired knowledge? How can I refine my discovery process so this specific failure never happens again?
And the text mentions how this internal locus and high AQ apply to how they view their competition, which I found to be one of the most intense parts of this whole framework.
It is a phenomenal distinction.
Tell me about it.
When an average performer loses a deal to a competitor, they usually complain that the competitor undercut their price, or played dirty or had some unfair advantage.
The external locus talking again.
Exactly. But ultra-high performers, they study their competitors with the intensity of a military strategist.
They treat business like high-stakes professional sports.
They really do.
You don't just show up on Sunday and hope for the best. You spend the entire week watching game tape of the opposing team.
They take massive personal pride in knowing more about their competitors than the competitors know about themselves.
That is intimidating.
It is. They don't just know the competing product's features. They study the competitors' sales tactics, their historical pricing strategies, the nuances of their marketing campaigns, and even the names and personal selling styles of the opposing sales reps.
Wow. So when they walk into a room with a client who is considering the competition, the UHP already knows exactly what the other guy pitched.
Down to the talking points.
And they know where the holes in that pitch are and how to position their own solution as the only logical choice.
The author states it beautifully. UHPs are not intimidated by competitors. They intimidate competitors.
As they just know more.
And this dominance isn't because they were necessarily born with a higher IQ.
Right. It's not the hardware.
It is entirely because of their massive AQ advantage. They simply put in the grueling work to know more, and then they deploy that knowledge with absolute precision.
The application for anyone listening is to ruthlessly audit your own locus of control.
Today, right now.
Think about the last time you faced a significant business setback. Maybe a lost client, a failed product launch, or missing a quota.
We all have them.
Pay very close attention to what your brain did in the first 5 minutes after that failure.
That's the tell.
Did you immediately look for an external scapegoat? Did you blame the client for being, quote, unreasonable?
If so, your external locus is suffocating your potential.
Exactly. The growth happens the moment you pause, swallow your ego, and ask, what could I have known or done differently to shape a better outcome?
That's where AQ is built. So now we have an individual who has leveraged their raw processing power, their IQ, to rapidly accumulate a massive database of knowledge, their AQ.
They have the brain power and the expertise.
But we run into a physical limitation.
Which is?
In the modern business landscape, the sheer volume of data, the number of emails, the scheduling, the follow-ups, it is just too much for any human brain to handle manually.
There just aren't enough hours in the day. You can be a genius with an encyclopedic knowledge of your industry, but if you are spending 6 hours a day manually entering data into a CRM, you are going to lose to someone who isn't.
Exactly. And this introduces the third crucial layer, technological intelligence, or TQ.
TQ, let's get into it.
Technological intelligence is the ability to interact with technology and weave it seamlessly, almost invisibly, into your daily workflow.
And I have to say, the source material takes a very firm, almost ruthless stance on the necessity of TQ today.
It really pulls no punches.
It basically tells the reader that the era of tech incompetence is dead.
Buried. The text cites a compelling article from the Harvard Business Review by Baumgartner, Hatami, and Valdiviso.
What was their finding?
Their research indicates that moving forward, beyond just possessing foundational relationship skills, a professional's success will be determined almost entirely by their ability to understand data and work effectively alongside artificial intelligence and machines.
That fundamentally shifts the baseline of what it means to be employable.
It really does.
Because for years, people in sales or relationship-driven businesses have worn their lack of tech skills almost like a badge of honor.
Oh, you hear it all the time.
Oh, I'm a people person, I'm just not a computer person. Or I leave the tech stuff to the IT department.
The author is unequivocal on this point. You can no longer afford the luxury of claiming you are not tech savvy.
It's not cute anymore.
It's not. Doing so in today's market instantly downgrades you into the below average category.
Oh.
If you resist technological adoption, you won't just struggle. You will systematically be made obsolete and left out of a job.
It is a harsh truth, but ignoring it is professional suicide at this point.
Absolutely.
But let's look at the reality of the ultra-high performers. They aren't all software engineers.
No.
They don't all know how to code in Python. So how are they interacting with technology in a way that gives them this massive TQ advantage without needing a computer science degree?
They approach technology through a very specific behavioral framework that the author outlines as the 3A.
The 3 A's, which are?
Adopt, adapt, and adapt.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics of each of those. The first step is adopt. What does adoption actually look like for a UHP compared to just an average worker?
Well, average workers wait for technology to be forced upon them.
Like a mandate from corporate.
Exactly. They wait until the company mandates a new software rollout,
Yeah.
and usually they complain about it.
Oh, great. Another system to learn.
Right. But UHPs are proactive early adopters. They are constantly scanning the horizon for cutting-edge tools, AI assistants, advanced analytics, new automation software, anything that might give them an edge.
And the text notes a fascinating detail here.
What's that?
UHPs are frequently willing to pay for these premium tools out of their own pocket if their company won't provide them.
Yes, simply because they recognize the ROI of a competitive advantage.
They don't see a $50 a month software subscription as an expense. They view it as an investment in their own personal infrastructure.
That's the UHP mindset. And once they have acquired the tool, we move to the second A, adapt.
Adapt. How does that work?
This is where the strategic thinking of IQ and AQ comes into play. They don't just use the technology out of the box, they adapt it to their unique, specific workflow.
They bend it to their will.
Exactly. They figure out how to leverage the tech to automate their low-value, repetitive tasks.
And we need to pause here because understanding why they automate is the most important part of this entire concept.
It is the crux of TQ.
They aren't automating their workflow so they can take a longer lunch break or, browse the internet.
No, the motivation is entirely strategic. They automate low-value tasks to buy back their most finite resource, which is time.
Right.
If an AI can draft routine follow-up emails, update the CRM, and schedule meetings, the UHP has just clawed back maybe 3 hours of their day.
And what do they do with those 3 hours?
They focus intensely on high-value human interactions, complex problem-solving, and high-level strategy.
They use machines to handle the rote work so they can be more profoundly human.
That is such a powerful reframe.
It really is. Which leads us to the final A, adept.
Because they have adopted the tool and adapted it to their workflow, they rapidly assimilate this technology into their daily routine until they become highly adept at using it.
And the text makes a vital psychological point here.
Yes, they don't become adept because they were born with some magical affinity for software interfaces.
They aren't just naturally gifted at tech.
No, they become adept because they have the courage to experiment.
They just dive in.
They aren't afraid of clicking the wrong button and breaking something. They utilize on-demand learning, watching YouTube tutorials, reading forums, to figure it out as they go.
They leverage that internal locus of control we talked about earlier.
Exactly. They take ownership of the learning curve.
Instead of saying, oh, this software is confusing, I can't use it, they say, I am going to watch a 10-minute tutorial until I master this.
That's the difference.
So the massive takeaway here is that technology and AI are not replacing the salesperson, the consultant, or the entrepreneur.
No, the technology is replacing the busy work.
This brings us to a chilling but highly clarifying prediction from the text regarding the future of the global workforce.
It is a sobering thought. As automation accelerates, there will essentially be two types of business professionals left.
And those are?
Those who tell the machines what to do, and those who are told what to do by the machines.
Wow. If you are relying on rote tasks and basic data processing for your paycheck, you will eventually be managed by an algorithm or entirely replaced by one.
It's inevitable.
You want to be the architect of the automation, not the subject of it.
It is the ultimate goal of TQ. Master the technology. Use it to ruthlessly buy back your time.
Because you're going to need every second of that time for the one critical arena where machines, algorithms, and AI are entirely useless.
And what's that?
Building emotional, authentic, trusting human relationships.
Which brings us to the crescendo of this entire framework.
Yes, the final piece.
If TQ frees up your schedule so you have more time to sit face-to-face with a client, how do you ensure that interaction doesn't end in disaster?
Right. How do you prevent that high IQ from derailing the conversation like we talked about at the beginning?
You need the fourth level of intelligence, emotional intelligence, or EQ.
Let's define it.
Sales EQ is specifically defined in the text as the ability to perceive, correctly interpret, respond to, and effectively manage your own emotions, while simultaneously navigating and influencing the emotions of others.
Okay, going back to our earlier car analogy.
Let's hear it.
If IQ is the raw horsepower of the engine, right?
Right.
And AQ is the navigation system telling you where to go.
Yep.
And TQ is the turbocharger making the whole process hyper efficient.
Love it.
Then EQ is the suspension system.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It is the shocks and struts that keep the car on the road road when you hit the inevitable bone-rattling potholes of dealing with unpredictable human beings.
It is the perfect continuation of the metaphor, because human beings are incredibly unpredictable.
We really are.
We like to think we are rational creatures, but we are deeply emotional, highly fallible, and often completely irrational.
Especially when money or careers are on the line.
Exactly. And the text points out a fascinating cultural shift. In an increasingly automated, tech-dominated society, buyers and clients are absolutely starved for authentic human interaction.
It makes total sense. I mean, we spend all day talking to chatbots, navigating automated phone trees, and receiving personalized but robotic email blasts.
It's dehumanizing.
So when a client finally gets a human being on the phone or across the table, they are desperately craving a real connection, not another data dump.
And this is exactly why EQ is the ultimate amplifier of performance. It offsets and neutralizes any deficiencies you might have in IQ, AQ, or TQ.
It's the great equalizer.
It really is.
Mm.
The source material references Daniel Goleman's seminal 1995 book on emotional intelligence.
That book changed everything.
It was a watershed moment because it took the concept out of obscure academic circles and proved its immense quantifiable value in the mainstream business world.
Because without EQ, everything else you've built falls apart at the finish line, right?
It all crumbles.
You can have the most brilliant high IQ solution backed by years of AQ industry knowledge, delivered via the most cutting-edge TQ presentation software, and the client will still say no.
They will say no, because if you fail to connect with the human being on the other side of the table, all the facts and logic in the world become totally irrelevant.
People buy from people they trust.
And trust is an emotional resonance, not a mathematical equation.
So how does the text break down the actual mechanics of applying this? Because EQ can sometimes feel like a nebulous, touchy-feely concept.
It can, but it's very tactical.
How does a UHP actually execute it in a high-stakes scenario?
The text breaks sales EQ down into two distinct, actionable skill sets. The first is interpersonal skills.
Intrapersonal.
Yes,
Yeah.
this is the internal battle. It is the ability to recognize and manage your own disruptive emotions in real time.
Give me an example of what an intrapersonal failure looks like in a sales context.
Okay, imagine you are pitching a massive contract. You're halfway through, and the lead stakeholder suddenly interrupts you, aggressively challenging your pricing model and questioning your company's track record.
Oh, stressful.
Very. A person with low EQ will experience what psychologists call an amygdala hijack.
Their brain basically panics.
Their fight-or-flight response triggers.
Mhm.
They feel attacked, their ego flares up, and they respond defensively, arguing back with the client to prove they are right.
They might win the argument intellectually, but they completely destroy the relationship.
And they lose the deal. Every time.
But the UHP with high intrapersonal EQ handles that same exact attack differently.
Completely differently. The UHP feels that same initial spike of adrenaline, sure, but their intrapersonal EQ allows them to recognize it, regulate the anxiety, and detach their ego from the situation.
They stay incredibly calm and grounded.
Unbothered. And once they have managed their own internal state, they can pivot to the second skill set, interpersonal skills.
This is where they turn their focus outward toward the client.
Yes. Interpersonal EQ is the ability to accurately read the room, decipher the unspoken emotions of the stakeholders, and respond appropriately.
It requires a really high degree of empathy.
It does. But the text is very careful to define what kind of empathy is required here, calling it a dual process.
The dual process concept is vital because I've seen people who are highly empathetic actually fail in business because they get too emotionally enmeshed with the client's problems.
Yes.
They end up acting like a therapist instead of a consultant.
Which is why the dual process is the absolute foundation of effective sales EQ.
How does it work?
It means you possess the mental and emotional acuity to step outside of yourself and view the situation entirely from the stakeholder's perspective. That's the profound empathy side of the equation.
You really feel what they're feeling.
You genuinely understand their fear of making a bad purchase or their anxiety about their own job security if this deal goes wrong.
But
simultaneously, you remain completely anchored to your sales objective and your targeted next step.
So you care deeply about their feelings and validate their concerns, but you never lose sight of the fact that you are there as a professional to execute a job, to close a deal, and to move the project forward.
You are regulating your empathy so it doesn't derail the business outcome.
You're using it, not getting lost in it.
Right. Instead, you are using that empathy to ensure the client feels heard, understood, and fundamentally safe. You are meticulously tuning into their emotional frequency before you ever attempt to deploy your intellectual arguments.
If someone listening to this is preparing for a high-stakes meeting or a tough negotiation today, that application of this is incredibly clear.
It is step one.
Before you walk into that room, before you open your laptop, pause. Force yourself to prioritize the emotional state of the human beings you are about to interact with.
Empathy before logic.
Ask yourself, what are their unspoken fears right now? What are their personal aspirations tied to this deal?
Because if you walk in and try to argue pure logic with a stakeholder who is operating on deep-seated anxiety, you will lose every single time, no matter how high your IQ is.
This understanding of EQ is what allows us to bring all four of these disparate concepts together into a single, cohesive framework.
It ties it all together beautifully.
The text crystallizes this into a mathematical equation, right?
It does. IQ plus AQ plus TQ plus EQ equals ultra-high performance.
Let's synthesize this whole journey for the listener, because seeing how these four intelligences interact is where the real breakthrough happens.
Think of it as a compounding stack of capabilities.
Okay.
Your IQ is your raw brain power. It is fixed, providing your baseline processing speed.
No hardware.
Your AQ is your accumulated knowledge. It takes that raw processing power and makes it relevant and useful in the real world.
The software you install.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your TQ is your technological leverage. It automates the mundane, effectively giving you more hours in the day.
The turbocharger. But the EQ.
The EQ is what actually makes the other three matter.
It's the glue.
EQ is the ultimate amplifier. It is the multiplier effect. You can have genius IQ, encyclopedic AQ, and state-of-the-art TQ. But if your EQ is zero, anything multiplied by zero is still zero.
That is a harsh but true mathematical reality.
People who manage to combine a high IQ, robust AQ, and advanced TQ with a highly developed EQ are what the text categorizes as high-Q individuals.
And these high-Q individuals are the ones playing a completely different game than everyone else.
They absolutely dominate the top of the food chain in business, entrepreneurship, and life.
They have it all.
They have the cognitive ability to understand complex data, the discipline to master their industry, the foresight to leverage cutting-edge tech, but above all, they know how to move the human heart.
They inspire trust.
Meanwhile, low-Q people, even those with off-the-charts Mensa-level IQs, will constantly struggle, plateau, and just scrape by because they fundamentally cannot connect the pieces together in a human context.
It completely reframes what we mean when we call someone quote-unquote smart in a business setting.
Smart isn't just one thing anymore.
Being book smart is no longer enough. You have to be system smart and human smart.
Exactly.
Now that you have the anatomy of these four intelligences dialed in, you possess the exact foundational blueprint needed to actually bend the universe to your will, or, as the ultra-high performers call it, shaping win probability, which we will be diving into next time.
It really is the ultimate survival guide for a rapidly evolving, highly complex marketplace.
But before we go, I want to leave you with one final provocative concept to mull over as you tackle your work today.
Oh, this is a good one.
Think about the trajectory we are on right now. As artificial intelligence continues to evolve at lightning speed, it will inevitably commoditize IQ, AQ, and TQ.
It's already happening.
In the very near future, the machines will have all the cognitive processing power, they will have access to all the accumulated facts in human history, and they will operate the technology flawlessly.
Leaving us with what?
Which leaves every single one of us with one incredibly disruptive question. When the machines can outthink and outprocess you, is your emotional intelligence high enough to be your sole competitive advantage?
So, if you think that the ultimate goal of a sales conversation or, a high-stakes negotiation or really any business meeting is to make a friend or build a relationship, you're basically setting yourself up to fail.
Yeah, it completely shatters the conventional wisdom, doesn't it? I mean, we are conditioned from day one in business to believe that if you just, get people to like you, the revenue will magically follow.
Right, the whole relationship selling thing.
Exactly. But when you actually study the data on ultra-high performers, that belief isn't just slightly wrong. It is actively destructive to their success.
And that's exactly the tension we're tackling today in this deep dive, because everywhere you look, whether it's, entrepreneurship forums or corporate training modules, you see this endless repetition of the phrase relationship selling.
Oh, absolutely. Be a people person.
Yeah. Grab golf and drinks. Be their buddy. But the reality is you are there to do a deal, not to make a buddy. Yet, here's the incredible paradox we're going to explore today. You cannot actually do that deal without deeply, genuinely understanding the person sitting across from you. You have
Right.
to care about their reality in order to achieve your own, essentially self-centered goal.
And that paradox is, it's the exact dividing line between average professionals and the absolute elite. Because average people, they pick a side. They either care way too much about the relationship and they just give away the farm, or they care too much about the deal and they completely alienate the client. The elite, though, they do both simultaneously.
So today, we're going to deconstruct how to actually execute that balancing act. We're diving into a psychological framework known as the dual process.
It really is the master skill.
It is. It's this rare ability of ultra-high performers to fiercely drive toward a concrete business outcome, while at the exact same time holding this deep, genuine empathy for the person across the table.
Yeah, and it matters because
Because mastering this, right, it eliminates the anxiety of selling. It stops you from being manipulated by savvy buyers, and it transforms you from a typical vendor into an indispensable partner.
it fundamentally changes how you view human interaction in a commercial setting. Because, as we'll see today, the human brain isn't naturally wired to handle these two opposing forces at the same time. Under pressure, our biology basically forces us into one of two default failure modes.
Let's actually start right there with those failure modes, because before we can build up the dual process, we really have to tear down the dangerous myths of those two extreme personas that most people default to.
Right.
I guarantee anyone listening has either been one of these people or, worked alongside them. So let's look at the first ditch that people swerve into. The people person.
Ah, yes. This is perhaps the most common trap, especially for well-meaning entrepreneurs and consultants. The people person is a professional who simply cannot regulate their disruptive emotional need to be liked.
Disruptive is a strong word there.
The word disruptive is crucial here. I mean, we all want to be liked socially. That's just being human. But for this persona, the psychological need for social acceptance is so overwhelming that it actively disrupts their ability to execute a business process.
Okay, hold on. Let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Sure, go for it.
If I'm a naturally empathetic person, like I'll say I'm the one my friends always call when they go through a bad breakup, are you telling me I am biologically at a disadvantage in a business negotiation? Because, needing to be liked usually just translates to being a nice, agreeable human being.
Well, you aren't at a disadvantage necessarily, but you have a very specific vulnerability.
Okay, how so?
In your personal life, alleviating someone's tension, being that shoulder to cry on, makes you a great friend. But in a business context, growth and change actually require tension.
Ah, I see.
Think about it. If a client is going to switch providers or they're going to spend, say, $100,000 on new software, there is going to be friction. It's unavoidable.
Right, there's risk involved for them.
Exactly. And the people person is utterly terrified of that friction. They confuse professional tension with personal rejection.
Oh, wow. So they just avoid the tension entirely to protect the friendship.
Yeah.
What does that actually look like in the boardroom then?
It looks like a remarkably pleasant 45-minute meeting where absolutely nothing of substance gets accomplished.
Just a nice chat.
A lovely chat. The people person walks into the room or they hop on the Zoom call and their brain just goes into absolute overdrive trying to build rapport. They bond over shared hobbies. They talk about the kids. They commiserate about the weather.
Right.
And when the conversation finally eventually turns to business, they stay entirely in this passive, accommodating mode. Like if the client complains about their budget being tight, the people person nods empathetically and immediately instinctively starts thinking about how to offer a discount.
So they walk out of the building feeling fantastic because the client smiled and shook their hand.
Yeah.
But, their sales pipeline is basically a ghost town.
Exactly. They mistake a pleasant conversation for a productive one. When the buyer says, your price is 20% higher than your competitor, the people person doesn't push back.
Because pushing back creates tension.
Right. They don't challenge the buyer's assumptions, and they certainly don't ask those hard, uncomfortable questions about the actual cost of inaction. They capitulate. They fold instantly because the mere thought of the buyer being slightly annoyed with them, it triggers a minor panic response in their brain. They prioritize their own emotional comfort over their professional objective.
That makes total sense when you frame it around tension. It reminds me of a doctor who is so desperate to be liked by a patient that they refuse to prescribe a painful but necessary physical therapy regimen.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. Like the doctor lets the patient stay sick just to avoid a slightly awkward conversation about, taking their medicine and doing the hard work. It feels nice in the room, but it's a massive dereliction of duty.
That is the perfect way to look at it.
No.
You are not actually serving your client if you don't solve their problem. And you cannot solve their problem if you lack the courage to actually secure the business. The people person ultimately fails because they weaponize their own empathy against themselves.
Yeah, that's wild.
Now, if we swing the pendulum to the complete opposite end of the spectrum, we hit the other catastrophic failure mode, which is the cold manipulator.
Right, the shark. The person who views business strictly as a zero-sum game where, they have to win and you have to lose.
Exactly. The shark is entirely outcome-focused to the severe detriment of everything else. They have zero emotional investment in the stakeholders' reality.
Just totally cold.
Yes. To them, the human being sitting across the table is really nothing more than an obstacle standing between them and a signed contract or a commission check. They bulldoze through conversations, they ignore all nonverbal cues of discomfort, and they just push relentlessly to extract maximum value.
But wait, popular culture basically tells us that's exactly how Wall Street and high-level corporate sales work, right? I mean, we have entire movies dedicated to the aggressive closer who won't take no for an answer, who steamrolls objections and walks away with millions. If it's a failure mode, why is it such a pervasive myth?
It's a myth because it relies on a fundamental misunderstanding of human behavioral psychology. Buyers are not perfectly rational, logic-driven machines. They are emotional, highly risk-averse creatures.
Okay.
When you act like a cold manipulator, your aggressive behavior triggers an immediate threat response in the buyer's amygdala. Their emotional walls instantly fly up. And when a buyer feels threatened or pressured, they retreat into what behavioral psychologists call a buyer script.
What exactly is a buyer script? Is it like a literal set of memorized lines?
Essentially, yes. It's a rote, habituated response designed to get rid of a salesperson safely. Think about when you walk onto a car lot, right? A salesperson approaches you and asks, "Hey, can I help you find something?" Even if you are there specifically to buy a car today, what is your immediate automatic response?
Just looking.
Just looking. That is a buyer script. It is an automatic defense mechanism, and the cold manipulator triggers these scripts constantly.
Like, send me an email with some information.
Exactly. Send me some information. We have no budget right now. Call me back in 6 months. The shark might win a few highly transactional one-off deals through sheer brute force and numbers.
Right, it's just playing the odds.
Yeah, but in any complex business environment, anything involving high stakes, long-term implementation, or personal risk for the buyer, the shark just gets shut out. Because at the end of the day, people buy from people they feel actually understand them and have their back.
So we have a total dichotomy here. Both extremes crash and burn, just in very different ways. The people pleaser starves to death because they absolutely refuse to ask for the business, and the cold manipulator gets locked out of the building because they act like a sociopath. So for anyone listening right now, before you go into your next pitch or negotiation, you really need to do a brutally honest audit of your own default behavior. Like when the heat gets turned up in a room, when the prospect says no, which ditch do you naturally swerve into? Do you fold to preserve the friendship, or do you steamroll to get the win?
You absolutely have to identify your default reflex. If you don't know your own biases under pressure, you have zero chance of overriding them.
Which brings us to the actual solution. We know what doesn't work. Let's define what does. Let's build out the dual process itself. And to frame this, there is an incredible quote from the novelist S. Scott Fitzgerald in the source material that perfectly encapsulates what we are trying to achieve inside the brain here.
Right, Fitzgerald wrote, "The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function."
Still retain the ability to function.
Right.
I feel like that last part is where the rubber really meets the road.
Exactly. Dual process is the direct, real-world application of that psychological test. You are forcing your brain to hold two seemingly opposed behaviors in your mind and execute both of them seamlessly.
Okay, break that down for us.
Let's look at the two tracks you're running. Step 1 is empathy. This means stepping completely authentically and without any judgment into the stakeholder's shoes. You view the problem, the financial risk, the corporate politics, all of it entirely from their emotional perspective.
You actually care about the pressure they are under. Like, you aren't just faking it.
You cannot fake it. Humans are exceptionally good at detecting insincerity. You have to genuinely connect with their reality. But, and here's where that first-rate intelligence comes in, step 2 is outcome.
Outcome. Okay.
While you are fully immersed in their shoes, you are simultaneously maintaining an unbreakable, unyielding focus on your own business objective and your targeted next step.
See, this is the part that scrambles my brain a little bit. How do you deeply care about someone's stress while simultaneously trying to, you know, extract money from them? It feels like those two things should naturally cancel each other out.
It does feel that way, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's like you are actively detaching from your own egocentric need to be liked. You're accepting that the client might get frustrated with you during the process, but you're doing it for the sake of achieving the objective. It's like you are using empathy, but not for the normal social reasons we're used to.
And that is the absolute brilliance of it. You are deeply empathetic, yet completely detached from needing their emotional validation.
Wow. Okay.
The people person uses empathy as a social crutch to feel safe in the room. The ultra-high performer uses empathy as a strategic data gathering tool. By understanding their emotional state so deeply, you know exactly how to guide them toward the outcome.
That changes the entire paradigm. I'm actually picturing a highly seasoned physical therapist right now.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, think about it. They are incredibly empathetic to your injury, right? They know the manipulation they are doing to your knee hurts. They genuinely feel for you. But they do not stop pushing your leg backward because their ultimate outcome is getting you to walk again.
Oh, that's good.
They balance the empathy for your immediate pain with the relentless drive for the long-term outcome. If they only had empathy, they'd let you go home and you'd literally never heal.
Yeah.
If they only had outcome, they'd just tear your ligaments trying to force it.
That is a phenomenal analogy. The physical therapist operates purely in dual process. So the question is, how does a professional listener practically apply this tomorrow morning?
Yeah, how do we actually do this?
It requires a physical anchor. The human brain is incredibly prone to emotional contagion. We tend to catch the emotions of the people in the room. If the buyer gets anxious, we get anxious. To prevent yourself from getting swept down that river of empathy and forgetting why you are even there, you need a tether.
Okay, so what's the tether?
Before you walk into any meeting, you write down your exact targeted next step. Make it tangible. Write it on a sticky note and put it on your laptop bezel. Write it in the margins of your notebook. Is the goal to secure a meeting with the CEO? Is it to get a verbal agreement on pricing? Whatever it is, write it down.
Just a physical reminder right in front of you.
Yes, because during the meeting, you can be as warm, empathetic, and understanding as you want, and you should be. But that sticky note is your anchor. No matter how deep into their world you go, you continuously use that empathy to steer the ship back to that written outcome.
A physical anchor to keep the outcome alive while the empathy runs wild. I love that. But I want to drill down into that empathy piece a bit more, though.
Sure.
Because, empathy has become this fluffy catch-all corporate buzzword. Every company claims they have empathy, right? But in the context of ultra-high performance, empathy is a highly specific, measurable, and manageable psychological tool. Let's look at the empathy scale from the source material and what top performers are actually doing differently here.
Right. To set the stage for this, we really have to look at the relationship between cognitive intelligence and emotional intelligence. There's a brilliant insight from author Dean Koontz, who noted that cognitive intelligence is empty without empathy.
Which flies in the face of how we usually hire people. I mean, we usually prize raw IQ above all else in business, especially in tech, finance, consulting. We always want the smartest person in the room.
We do, but the psychological data shows that a high IQ paired with a low EQ emotional intelligence actively destroys business relationships. Highly intelligent people process information incredibly fast. They see patterns and connections instantly. And as a result, they frequently become wildly impatient with people who process at a normal speed.
Oh, yeah, we've all seen that.
They interrupt, they talk over people, or worse, they overwhelm buyers with massive, overly complex solutions to what the buyer thought was a relatively simple problem.
Oh, right. It's like, oh, you just need a hammer to hang a picture. Let me spend 40 minutes explaining the metallurgy of this pneumatic titanium nail driving system.
Precisely. And how does the buyer feel in that scenario?
They feel stupid, probably.
They feel stupid and they feel alienated. The high IQ salesperson thought they were proving their competence, but they actually just triggered the buyer's defense mechanisms. So IQ alone is not enough. You absolutely must have empathy to regulate it.
Right.
But this is where the research gets incredibly counterintuitive. If we look at psychological testing on an empathy scale from 1 to 10, a 1 is effectively a clinical psychopath, someone completely devoid of effective empathy.
Okay, and a 10.
A 10 is someone who is hyper-empathetic, someone who absorbs the emotions of everyone around them to the point where they can barely function if someone else in the room is upset.
Right. So logically, if empathy is the secret sauce to the dual process, you would assume the absolute best salespeople in the world, the top 1%, are naturally gifted empaths. You'd think they sit at an 8 or a 9 on that scale.
That is the logical assumption, yes. But the psychometric data proves the exact opposite. Elite sales professionals and top negotiators are actually naturally self-centric. They typically score around a 3 or a 4 on the empathy scale.
Wait, hold up. The best relationship builders in business are a 3 or a 4. They are closer to a psychopath than they are to a hyper-empath.
I know, it sounds...
That sounds like an indictment of the entire profession.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're saying you have to be slightly sociopathic to succeed.
It sounds alarming until you really look at the biological and psychological requirements of the job. To survive in a high-stakes commercial environment, you must have a massive internal drive to win. You need ego drive. You have to be deeply motivated by personal achievement.
Okay, I could see that.
But more importantly, you have to possess the psychological armor to run headlong into daily, brutal rejection without curling up into a fetal position.
The rejection factor.
Exactly. Imagine if you were an 8 or a 9 on the empathy scale. You pitch a solution, and the buyer aggressively shoots you down and tells you your product is terrible. An 8 or a 9 would be emotionally devastated.
They take it so personally.
They would absorb all the buyer's negativity. Furthermore, they would feel immense guilt for making the buyer uncomfortable during the pitch in the first place. The constant daily rejection would literally destroy their mental health. A 3 or a 4, on the other hand, is insulated. Their natural self-centricity protects them from absorbing the sting of rejection.
Okay, that makes perfect survival sense. But it leaves us with a massive contradiction here.
How so?
Well, if their natural baseline is a 3, meaning they're somewhat self-absorbed and thick-skinned, how on earth are they executing step 1 of the dual process? How are they showing this deep, genuine empathy if they aren't naturally wired for it?
Through a highly disciplined cognitive mechanism called intentional empathy.
Intentional empathy.
Yes. Because they aren't naturally hyper-empathetic, they do not rely on passive instinct. A 9 just automatically feels what you feel. A 3 has to consciously, deliberately decide to tune in to the other person. They treat empathy not as a passive emotion that just washes over them, but as an active intellectual discipline that they execute.
That is actually incredibly liberating for the listener. It means you don't have to be born as some perfect, warm, and fuzzy empath to be elite at relationship building.
Right.
You just have to use better mental frameworks to essentially hack your way into empathy when it matters.
Exactly. You're hacking it.
And the psychology behind this points to one of the most powerful mental hacks available, which is the concept of attributions. Let's dig into that.
Psychological attributions are an absolute game changer for mastering intentional empathy. To understand this, we have to look at what psychologists call the fundamental attribution error. When we evaluate our own mistakes, we blame our circumstances. I was late because traffic was terrible. But when we evaluate other people's mistakes, we blame their character. They were late because they are lazy and disrespectful.
We judge ourselves by our intentions and others by their behavior.
Exactly. So let's apply this to a business meeting. Let's say you are pitching a prospect, and they are acting angry, short, and just highly dismissive of you. An average professional with low emotional regulation immediately makes a dispositional attribution.
Meaning they attribute the prospect's bad behavior to the prospect's internal disposition or personality. Like, this guy is a jerk. This woman is an absolute nightmare.
Right. And what happens neurobiologically? The exact second you label someone a jerk, your own emotional walls fly up, your amygdala fires, you go straight into a fight or flight stress response.
Yep.
You stop listening, you get defensive, and the relationship is effectively dead on arrival.
Because your brain is telling you that you are under attack by a hostile entity.
Yeah.
So how does the ultra-high performer, the person who's a 3 on the empathy scale, short-circuit that response?
They force their brain to make a situational attribution instead. When the buyer snaps at them, the high performer consciously intercepts their own defensive reflex. They actively tell themselves, this person isn't inherently evil. They must be dealing with a terrible situation.
Right, giving them the benefit of the doubt.
Exactly. They think maybe their board of directors just cut their budget. Maybe they are under immense pressure to hit a deadline and I'm slowing them down. They attribute the negative behavior to the situation, not the person's character.
That is a phenomenal reframing. Because if the person is a jerk, you have to fight them. But if the person is just having a bad day, you can help them. It immediately neutralizes your own defensive response. You don't take it personally. Your blood pressure stays low, which allows you to stay calm, stay in the dual process, and actually de-escalate the tension in the room.
It is a profound skill. It prevents you from becoming emotionally hijacked by someone else's bad mood.
I mean, that's just a great life skill, frankly. If someone cuts you off in traffic, assuming they are rushing to the hospital rather than assuming they are a sociopath, makes your own life so much better.
It really does.
So if you're listening to this and thinking about how to apply it, here is the challenge. The very next time a client, a prospect, or even a coworker sends you a passive-aggressive email or is short with you on a call, do not label them. Force your brain to make a situational attribution. Assume they just got a flat tire, or they're dealing with a personal crisis. Notice how that single cognitive shift instantly changes your tone, keeps your emotional walls down, and keeps you in control of the interaction.
Because that cognitive shift brings you right back into step one of dual process, which is empathy. And once you are firmly anchored in empathy, you can safely and effectively navigate to step two, the outcome.
So let's take all this, the psychology, the attributions, the dual process, and look at how it plays out in the real world. Specifically, I want to look at the most critical, delicate phase of any business relationship, which is discovery.
Ah, discovery.
Right? The phase where you are trying to figure out what the other person actually needs and what their pain points are. How do we apply dual process here?
Discovery is where we see the most spectacular, catastrophic failures from average performers. Because discovery requires extreme emotional intelligence, and when people lack it, they default to deeply toxic behaviors. There are two highly specific, destructive behaviors that ruin discovery. The first is what we can call the interrogation.
Ah, yes. Joe the interrogator. We've all met Joe.
We absolutely have. Joe fundamentally misunderstands the entire purpose of discovery. Joe thinks discovery is about extracting data points as efficiently as possible so he can, fill out his CRM fields.
You check in boxes.
Exactly. So Joe corners the prospect and peppers them with a rapid-fire sequence of accusatory, close-ended questions. Who is your current vendor? What are you paying them? Are you the final decision maker? When does your contract expire? What's your exact budget?
It's like a bad 1980s cop movie where they shine a halogen desk lamp right in the suspect's eyes in a dark room.
It is exactly like that. And more importantly, biologically, that is exactly how the prospect's nervous system interprets it. It registers as a literal attack. The prospect isn't feeling heard, they are feeling processed.
Wow. God, yes,
It shatters any potential for emotional connection. They feel uncomfortable, imposed upon, and manipulated by a rigid agenda.
And when a buyer feels manipulated, what do? We go right back to what you said earlier. They retreat into the buyer script.
Precisely. Their walls go right back up. They give one word, pat answers. They obfuscate the truth. They tell Joe whatever he wants to hear just to get him off the phone. Joe thinks he's being hyper-efficient, but he learns absolutely nothing of actual strategic value, and he kills the deal before it even starts.
Because Joe completely abandoned step one. He had zero empathy. He was 100% outcome. But Joe isn't the only problem here. There's another behavior that is arguably even more common and even more destructive, the phenomenon of the pump and pounce.
The pump and pounce. This is the silent killer of millions of deals, and it is born directly from a lack of impulse control and a complete failure of the dual process.
Break down the mechanics of a pump and pounce for us. What does it actually sound like in a meeting?
It starts innocently enough. The salesperson asks a decent open-ended question, pumping the buyer for information. They might ask, what is the biggest operational challenge your marketing team is facing this quarter?
Okay, good question.
Right. And the buyer leans back, thinks about it, and starts to open up. Well, to be honest, we are really struggling with our customer retention rates. They've dropped about 8%, and now here is where the disaster happens.
Oh.
The average rep hears the phrase, retention rates dropping, and they experience a massive spike of dopamine. They recognize a problem they can solve, and they immediately pounce.
They strike like a cobra.
Yes. The microsecond a pain point is mentioned, the salesperson interrupts the buyer's train of thought and launches into a pitch. Oh, you have retention problems. That's amazing. I mean, that's terrible. But let me tell you about our new predictive analytics retention module. It uses AI. It has a 99% success rate. It integrates seamlessly with your CRM. Let me share my screen and show
And the
this.
deal dies right there on the table.
Instantly.
But why, though? From a logical perspective, the buyer stated a problem and the seller immediately offered a solution. Logically, that's business. Why does the pump and pounce actually kill the deal psychologically?
Because it violently short-circuits the psychological mechanism of the self-disclosure loop. Human beings are neurobiologically wired to enjoy talking about themselves and their problems. When someone asks us a deep question and genuinely listens, our brain releases oxytocin and dopamine. We feel safe. We feel valued. The buyer in that scenario was just beginning to open the door to their inner world. They were preparing to give the salesperson the context, the nuance, and the real emotional weight of the problem. And the salesperson just slammed the door in their face with a product pitch.
It is the ultimate display of selfishness. By pouncing, you just signal to the buyer, I don't actually care about the depth of your pain or the nuance of your reality. I was merely using your answer as a tripwire so I could talk about myself and my product.
Exactly. The buyer's ears turn off immediately. They realize they aren't in a conversation. They are in a trap.
It's the equivalent of going on a terrible first date. Imagine you are at dinner and you ask your date, so do you like Italian food? And they say, oh, yes, I love pasta. And the second the word pasta leaves their lips, you aggressively interrupt them and spend the next 20 minutes bragging about your amazing trip to Rome.
Oh, that's painful.
Right. You talk about the private cooking class you took in Tuscany and how you know the best pasta chef in the city. You didn't ask them what their favorite dish is. You didn't ask where they like to go locally. You didn't care about their relationship to Italian food at all. You just used their answer as a springboard to broadcast your own ego. You completely destroyed the magic of the date.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. The pump and pounce is using a discovery question as a trapdoor for a monologue.
So if Joe the interrogator is too rigid and the pump and pouncer lacks impulse control, what is the antidote here? How do ultra-high performers handle discovery while staying in the dual process?
They utilize a conversational structure that we can call the fluid dual process discovery framework.
Okay, the fluid framework.
Yes. It feels completely organic to the buyer. It feels like a late-night conversation with a smart friend, not a checklist. And it follows a very specific, disciplined funnel. It always begins with broad, open-ended questions.
Like, walk me through how your team handles retention today, rather than what software do you use for retention?
Exactly. You give them a wide runway, and when the buyer starts talking, the ultra-high performer executes the hardest skill in business. They bite their tongue.
Just stay quiet.
They let the self-disclosure loop run. They listen deeply. Then, instead of pitching, they move to the second stage, which is probing questions. They encourage the buyer to keep expanding. Tell me more about that. How long has that specific issue been impacting the team? What did your board say when that happened?
They act as a facilitator of the other person's self-disclosure rather than an interrupter of it.
Yes. They are digging for the emotional root of the problem. Then they move to the third stage, clarifying questions. This is where you prove you have actually been listening and you synthesize their pain.
What did that sound like?
It sounds like, just to make sure I completely understand, the 8% drop in retention isn't just a vanity metric, it is actively jeopardizing your quarterly bonus structure and making it hard to hire new talent.
Wow. When you say that back to them, the buyer must feel incredibly seen.
They feel entirely understood. And finally, only after thoroughly exploring the depth of the issue with broad, probing, and clarifying questions do they seamlessly bridge to the outcome step. The final stage is the next step.
Right, the sticky note objective.
Exactly. You say, based on what you just shared about the bonus structure, I think we have a highly specific way to address that. Can we set up a 20-minute call next Tuesday with your VP to look at the mechanics of it?
Broad, open-ended, probing, clarifying, next step. It's so elegant. So if you're listening to this, here's the challenge for your next discovery call. Act as a pure facilitator of the other person's self-disclosure. Literally, physically bite the inside of your cheek if you feel the dopamine hit urging you to pitch.
It's hard, but you have to do it.
When the prospect reveals a problem, do not pounce. Ask a probing question to go one layer deeper. What happens if you can't fix that? Stay in their shoes. Gather the emotional data. It requires immense impulse control, but the payoff is absolute unbreakable trust.
It is the difference between being perceived as a vendor selling commodities and being perceived as a trusted advisor solving complex problems.
Okay, we've covered a massive amount of ground here. We've looked at the psychology, the empathy scale, the frameworks, the failure modes. But theoretical frameworks only take us so far. To really cement this, we need to look at how all these discrete skills fuse together in a high-stakes, real-world scenario.
Right. Let's look at a practical application.
There's a brilliant case study in the source material involving a jewelry salesperson named Shell that perfectly crystallizes dual process in action. Let's break down Shell the jeweler.
This is perhaps one of the finest illustrations of applied behavioral psychology in a retail or direct sales environment. Let's set the stage here. A young, clearly stressed out couple walks into a high-end jewelry store to buy an engagement ring. If you analyze their emotional state, they are likely terrified. They are feeling the immense societal and personal pressure of this massive life event. They are likely worried about money, and they are surrounded by glass cases filled with highly expensive items that they don't truly understand the intrinsic value of.
The tension in that environment is palpable. The groom is probably sweating through his shirt. Now let's run this scenario through our two failure modes first.
Let's do it.
If Shell, the salesperson, were a classic cold manipulator, the shark, how would she handle this couple?
Well, a cold manipulator is a predator who looks for vulnerability. The shark would immediately size them up, recognize the emotional volatility, and notice that the groom is desperately trying to impress his future bride and not look cheap. The shark weaponizes that pressure.
Oh, that's dark.
They would immediately push for the maximum budget. They would pull out the largest, most flawless diamonds. They would leverage the emotion of the moment, say things like, this is a once-in-a-lifetime investment in your love, and aggressively squeeze the groom for every dollar of his credit limit.
Completely ignoring the fact that they might be saddling this young couple with crippling, high-interest credit card debt right as they start their lives together.
Exactly.
Right. If you really love her, you'll finance this 2-carat rock. It's entirely outcome-focused. Maximum commission today, zero empathy for their financial reality. Okay, now flip it. What if Shell were a classic people pleaser, a hyper empath?
The people pleaser would instantly absorb the couple's anxiety. Shell would feel so much empathy for the groom's financial stress and the sheer cost of the rings that she might accidentally sabotage the entire process.
How so?
She'd be so worried about them taking on debt that she'd start projecting her own anxiety. She might show them the cheapest rings in the store, almost apologizing for the prices. Or she might even gently suggest, weddings are so expensive, why don't you guys wait a few years until you're more settled financially before buying a ring?
Wow. So empathy wins, but she loses the sale, she loses her commission, the store loses revenue, and frankly, the couple walks out without the ring they came in to buy. She didn't actually help them achieve their goal.
Exactly. She protected them emotionally but failed them functionally. But Shell doesn't do either of those things. Shell is an ultra-high performer. She executes the dual process flawlessly.
Walk us through her empathy step. How does she disarm that massive tension?
Instead of immediately driving toward the outcome, asking about budget, timeline, or diamond cuts, she starts by completely stepping into their shoes. She uses broad, open-ended questions to get them talking about their future.
Okay, building that rapport.
Right, but strategic rapport. She asks about their plans after the wedding. Are they looking to buy a house? Are they hoping to start a family soon? Are they paying for the wedding themselves? She gets them excited about the new chapter, but more importantly, she gently forces them to articulate the massive financial commitments that are looming on their horizon.
She's actively mapping their emotional and financial reality. She's not talking about jewelry. She's talking about their life.
Yes, and once she has gathered that data, she executes a masterstroke of intentional empathy.
What'd she do?
She selects a ring that is beautiful, but crucially one that is highly affordable and won't overburden them with debt. She places it on the counter, looks directly at the young man, and explicitly says, I'm recommending this specific ring because I want you two to get your marriage off on the right foot financially. You have a house and a family in your future. I am taking the heat off you today.
That phrase, I am taking the heat off you, that is absolute genius. Think about the neurobiology of the groom in that exact moment. His cortisol levels, his stress, they just instantly plummet to zero. She just validated his secret fear of going broke. She protected him from looking cheap in front of his fiancée, and she made them feel entirely, completely safe.
That is the ultimate execution of step 1, empathy. She proves she is unequivocally on their side. Now, here's where step 2, outcome, kicks in.
Right, she still has to sell the ring.
Yes, and by making them feel that profoundly safe, she has created an impenetrable moat around her business. She is virtually guaranteed that this couple will not walk out of her store and go to a competitor. Why would they?
They found a protector.
Exactly. Closing the sale becomes a mere formality. She locks in the revenue easily because they trust her implicitly.
She protected them emotionally. And E, she secured the business outcome today. She perfectly balanced the scales. But the story doesn't end there, because Shell plays a brilliant strategic long game. How does she handle the bride in this scenario, who maybe, secretly wanted a slightly bigger diamond?
Well, Shell understands human nature. She knows she downsold them today for their own good, but she doesn't want the bride to feel like she compromised on her lifelong dream. So she introduces a brilliant future pacing
Oh,
strategy.
I love this part.
She turns to the bride and says, listen, this ring is perfect for where you are right now, but I promise you this. Once you two are established, once you have the house, and you are on solid footing financially, you bring this ring back to me. I will give you the full purchase price in trade and value toward the bigger diamond you ultimately want.
She sells the Cinderella dream.
Exactly. She keeps the Cinderella dream alive. This gives the bride the psychological space to accept the rational, affordable decision today, knowing she isn't permanently giving up on her ultimate fantasy.
And look at what that does for Shell's business outcome. It fundamentally guarantees repeat business. In 5, 7, or 10 years, when that groom gets a promotion, they are going to a random jewelry store. They're walking straight back to Shell for the massive upgrade.
Absolutely.
And in the meantime, they're going to tell every single engaged couple they know to go see Shell because, quote, she won't rip you off.
By balancing extreme empathy, doing the right ethical thing for their current reality with a relentless outcome, securing the sale today and contractually setting up future larger sales, she maximizes the lifetime value of that client.
It's just brilliant.
The cold manipulator gets one expensive, regret-filled sale and a negative Yelp review. Shell gets a lifetime of loyalty, an annuity of future upgrades, and endless referrals.
It is the absolute perfect synthesis of being a shark and a saint. Which brings us to the core realization for anyone listening who wants to apply this to their own career. Think about your own deals, your own clients, your own negotiations. Where is the Cinderella dream in your business?
That's the question you have to ask yourself.
Right. How can you solve for the client's immediate emotional and financial reality today, making them feel safe and protected, while deliberately planting the seed for a logical, larger partnership in the future? Don't just try to aggressively extract maximum value right this second like a shark. Provide immense safety today and build the pathway for massive growth tomorrow.
That requires strategic patience. It requires you to delay immediate gratification for long-term leverage, which is the absolute hallmark of high emotional intelligence.
So let's step back and bring all of these disparate threads together. We've covered the dangerous extremes of the people pleaser and the manipulator. We've broken down the Fitzgerald paradox of dual process. We've explored the counterintuitive empathy scale, the power of situational attributions, and the absolute necessity of fluid discovery to avoid the pump and pounce.
We've covered a lot.
We really have. So if there is one singular, memorable insight that represents the absolute soul of this entire framework, how would you synthesize it for the listener?
I would synthesize it like this. The dual process conclusively proves that empathy and execution are not enemies. They are not mutually exclusive traits. In fact, they are synergistic partners.
I love that. Synergistic partners.
We have been taught for so long that empathy means being soft, being a doormat, or acting like an unpaid therapist. But in the theater of business, empathy is the ultimate, most sophisticated data-gathering tool you possess. By actively, bravely standing in the other person's shoes and absorbing their emotional reality, you learn the exact topographic map you need to navigate them toward the outcome that benefits you both.
You can absolutely be a shark about your business goals, fiercely protecting your pipeline, your margins, and your time, while simultaneously being a saint in your human interactions, making the people across the table feel heard, profoundly understood, and entirely safe.
You don't have to choose between being a good person and being a ruthless performer. That is the magic of the dual process.
And mastering that precise balance inside your own mind, overriding your biological defaults, is the key that unlocks ultra-high performance.
But there is a catch.
There's always a catch.
Always. Now that you understand the mechanics of mastering your own mind and you know how to balance your internal empathy with your outcomes, an entirely new, incredibly complex challenge arises.
Ooh.
The real question is, who exactly are you sitting across the table from? Because utilizing the dual process on a visionary, big-picture CEO requires a vastly different emotional map and vocabulary than using it on a hyper-analytical, detail-obsessed procurement manager.
Ah, that's a great point.
Empathy only works if you understand the specific psychological terrain of the person you are empathizing with. And that terrain changes wildly depending on their role and their personal motivations.
Exactly. You can't speak French to someone who only understands German, no matter how empathetic you are. Which is why, in our next deep dive, we are going to decode the hidden psychological personas of the 5 stakeholders you meet in a deal.
That's going to be a fun one.
It is. We will break down their hidden fears, their secret motivations, and show you exactly how to flex your communication style to win over every single one of them, from the skeptical engineer to the ambitious executive. Until then, keep your empathy high, keep your outcomes clear, and stay out of the ditch.
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.